doesn't make enough money between HR and IT. This one's better.
How many do you have? Just the one. But that one won't stretch to Aaron when he's here.
No, this cord is a little short. Oh, we're still flashing.
So how do we know when it's on?
When the light goes solid.
Oh, when it's solid?
It's like a traffic light. It'll turn yellow.
It was like orange.
But you can proceed. And we're on. All right, I'll call this regular meeting of the Sturgis Common Council to order, Monday, December 5th, 2022. First item's approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Got a first by Becca,
Second.
got a second by Mike, and a third by Preston. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. That motion carries. Please stand, remove cover, and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Included in the packet in the informational reports is the MUB minutes from the November 22nd meeting. Those are, I believe, ratified and complete there for that meeting. Item 5 is announcements and praise. I'd like to take a moment and pray if you'd like to join me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the ability to come before you and as a group. We thank you for this great community. We know you are sovereign. In this season of Thanksgiving and upcoming of Christmas, we just want to give you thanks for all the blessings that we have. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Got a couple of notes here. It was hard to hear everybody, so Chief and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but Thursday from 4 to 7 in the backside of the community center, is that a hazmat training? Tomorrow morning, not Thursday, so Tuesday morning. So the back lot will be closed, and that's what's going on there as an exercise for hazmat. That's all the notes that I had. We had a great weekend with tree lighting and the Parade of Lights. Much appreciated with everybody's input and participation. Council, have anything to add for announcements and praise? None being heard. Chris is up and ready, so I'll turn it over to you, sir, for the library update. And you have your own computer, I see.
Yep, we're all set and good to go. Looks like. All right. Well, thanks. I'm Chris Hahn. I'm the director of the library, and I want to start by thanking the mayor and the city council for the support that you guys give us all the time. One thing I hear over and over by visitors and residents is how wonderful the library is, and that's in no small part to your continued support. My first year as a director is coming to a close. And one thing that I tell people when they ask me how things are going is I say that our staff makes my job awfully easy. Everybody does just a fantastic job, and I'm lucky to work with them on a daily basis. I want to give you a brief overview of where things stand, at least this far in the year. We're almost wrapping up, but these are some statistics that I put together for you guys. Overall, about 40% of Meade County residents have a library card. It's kind of hard to separate out Sturgis from Meade County when we do the statistics, but most of the stats we have, about 2/3 of the numbers are Sturgis residents, and then Meade County makes up the other third. But 40% of our residents have a library card. We have a little room for improvement because the state average is 45%. So that's a goal I guess we can push for a little more that way. We have about 100,000 holdings, electronic and print. That includes books, magazines, DVDs, audiobooks, newspapers, equipment that we check out. The Black Hills Library Consortium, which we're a part of, has over 500,000. So as part of that consortium, we have easy access to all of that material. So we're in a really good place that way. So far this year, we've had a little over 37,000 books checked out, 5,700 audiobooks, DVDs, other equipment has been checked out. Our electronic system, Libby, which we'll talk about in just a second, over 19,000 people have checked stuff out there, and 4,800, almost 4,900 books through interlibrary loan, which includes books that are in the consortium but outside of the library, books that we get through libraries in South Dakota, and if they don't have it in South Dakota, then we go outside of the state and can find stuff and bring it in. So quite a bit of information is going through interlibrary loan. A big part of what we do is programming, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but so far this year we've had 255 programs, and a little over 3,400 people have been served by those programs. So I've had people say, well, you know, we need to get the community room booked more and more often, and I say, well, look at the calendar. It's most days we have at least one event in there, if not more than one. So we've got a lot of stuff going on that way, and we'll talk about that in a second. Computer usage, you know, it's easy. Most of us think, well, yeah, everybody has access to the web and they have computers and they have their phones and all that, but not necessarily the case. I mean, we measure computer usage in half-hour increments, and so far we're at 4,700 hours of computer usage for the year, and that's people coming in and using our equipment to check their email, to make appointments, we have therapy sessions that people come in and are able to do that. So quite a bit of usage that way. Also, people that are just using our Wi-Fi, not necessarily using our computers, those sessions are measured by usage. Somebody getting on, not necessarily how long they're on, but somebody using our Wi-Fi for something, we're at 23,000, probably 500 by now. So about 69 people per day, or 69 sessions per day, I should say, are using our Wi-Fi. Both are in the library and our external Wi-Fi. And you'll see, I mean, you see people all the time when the weather's nice sitting outside. When the weather's not so nice, they sit in their cars, but they're, you know, using our Wi-Fi for stuff. So it's used quite often. So that's a big part of what we're doing as well. And then, you know, pretty standard research, reference, and technology questions. We've had a little over 800 so far this year, and that's somebody asking for a phone number, somebody asking for information about genealogy, or looking for an obituary, or having technical issues with their device, and they'll bring it in and we try to work through it if we can. So that's just a quick look at some of the stuff we've been doing that way. We have, you know, we also have a lot of databases that don't get necessarily as used as they should be, but the South Dakota State Library has a number of databases that cardholders can access, and which includes consumer reports, genealogy sites, legal databases, journal indexes, and articles, language learning apps. I think they just added Duolingo, so if you wanted to learn a foreign language, you can do that through the website, or through the database, and that's included as a library patron. So all sorts of stuff that we can do for people. I wanted to talk a little bit about Libby, which is our online checkout system. So it used to be called Overdrive, but they rebranded, and so now they're called Libby. And we have 20,000, almost 21,000 different titles that are accessible. 7,800 audiobooks that you can check out, and it works just like your library card. You go in, you check it out, it gets put on your device, you can use it for 3 weeks, and then it gets returned. Of those, you know, 2,700, 2,800 titles, we have 43,000 copies. So a lot of things that are really popular, we have multiple copies that people can check out. And, you know, people are using that more and more. If they go on trips and they want to, you know, take audiobooks with them, they can do that without having to check out the CDs and all of that. So those are, that's free. Again, if you have a library card, you log in and it takes care of it for you. So Libby is proving to be really popular. In fact, we used it to purchase a lot of copies of our city read for the year, which was the work Wolves, because it's out of print. So we were able to find some used copies. We got a whole bunch of copies on Libby that we purchased, and then the South Dakota Humanities Council sent us all the copies that they have, and they also provided a grant for the author to come and talk about it as well. So Libby was influential in getting all of that going as well. So as far as programs, I mean, these are our regular programs that we have. Sierra does a great job of providing these programs. She kind of heads everything up, and also brings in other special programs, well, Thursday they're building gnomes. So if you want to build a gnome, you can show up at, I think it's 5 or 5:30 on Thursday. Next Monday, we have a presentation on Hank Williams. A woman's coming to talk about his life. These are all our regular programs. Of course, our summer reading program, which is all ages, and then we get them from 0 up until, whatever age, starting with baby and toddler story times and pre-K story times. The Mega Monday, Teen Tuesday, Wonder Math, those are geared toward preteen and teenagers. The Coding Club, we started up last year and it was pretty successful. That's for preteen and teens. Legos for all ages, that's I think a couple Mondays, and in fact they had it today, and it's great because you walk in there and you've got grandparents and their grandkids and they're sitting building Legos, and it's just fun to watch. So lots of great stuff. Armchair Travelers is for adults. They pick a theme every month and they read books and talk about it. History at High Noon is we co-sponsor with the Sturgis Area Arts Council. And Books on Tap, Sierra does at a various location around town. Every fourth Thursday they get together and talk about, again, a theme, not necessarily one book, but a theme, and everybody talks about the books they've read. And then they may or may not have something to drink afterwards or eat. And so there's some fellowship that goes along with the book club. Music Speaks is something that I started in the fall, which is we talk about and listen to music. We've talked about funk. We've talked about the effect of music on the brain. I did one on Art Song, which are these great little 1-2 minute songs that I'll be doing that one again probably in January because horrible weather and I had 2 people show up, so I was lucky to get them. But anyway, and then this month on the 15th we have a jazz combo coming into play and talk about a little bit about what jazz is and then do a lot of playing. So all sorts of great stuff going on. In the future, and this is the big thing coming up next year, is our a traveling exhibit from the Smithsonian. We've done a couple of these in the past. This one is called Crossroads, and it's all about changes in rural America. The Smithsonian and the South Dakota Humanities Council are the main sponsors. The Sturgis Area Arts Council is working with us to put this together. March 13th through April 29th, we'll have, there are 7 interactive displays that will be throughout the library. And then we have a set of exhibits and events that are going on that are more local. This is about, the exhibit is about changes throughout the country that have happened. And Pierre was going to be one of the hosts. Right now it's in Brookings, it's going to Yankton, then it comes here, then it goes to Fort Sisseton. So we're the only West River location now that's offering it, so that's kind of exciting. And this is a tentative schedule of events that we've got going on that are related to stuff happening here. I'll have a couple of music speaks that are going to work with that, a couple of history at high noons. One is about the changes to downtown. The other one is about the sale barn. I told them they can't bring the cows through the community room, but we'll see. We may put down a mat or something, I don't know. And then we've got a thing about women's suffrage. Molly Rosem teaches it at USD, and she's coming to speak about that. We've got a concert with a local group called Humbletown. They're based in Lead, and they do Americana, banjo, mandolin, and they have a fiddle player, and they're really good, so that's going to be exciting. And so lots of stuff going on. There's going to be a community photography exhibition during this, and also an essay contest for kids. And so lots of great things happening. That's all falling together. In the next couple weeks, we should have a final calendar that we'll start promoting this with. So that's the big thing coming up for us. And that's all I've got. Do you guys have any questions about anything?
I got a question on the coding. Do you guys work on writing software, teaching kids software? What's that
Yes,
entail?
and it's based on what the way that kids are taught coding now is through. We have a couple of different apps we use, and it's kind of building block. So there's a chunk of code, and you put these chunks of code together in different ways to try and get the program to run. And so it's a real basic introduction. And then after you've done that, then you start getting into how programs work and how to write code. We probably won't get to the point where they're actually writing lines of code, just because that takes a long time to learn the languages. But there are a lot of kind of prepackaged little chunks of code that you put together, and that's how we're approaching it. Yeah.
Other questions for Chris from council? I guess congrats on the Smithsonian deal. It's cool that we're
Yeah,
in West
that's
River.
that came together sort of at the last minute. We were lucky to get it. So like I said, we had done it twice. About every 10 years it seems to come through, and we've done the last two. So they knew that we could do it, and yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Cool. Well, Chris, we appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
well, thanks. Thanks.
Item 7 is city manager's report. So, Mr. Ainsley, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I did have a couple department heads that sent me a couple other announcements they wanted to make sure that would be brought up. Sunday at 2 at the Community Center Theater is the Community Christmas Concert. And so the public is more than invited to attend that. And then also Thursday from 4 to 7 at the Sturgis Hometown Market, there's an open house that is being set up there as well.
It was due to weather. It was rescheduled, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. Appreciate that, Daniel.
Yep. And then under my report, there's just a couple payroll changes. The first is our officer, Danny Stacy, has been promoted to a sergeant, so a change in payroll. And then also a few more changes in our ambulance division. Just we continually are training more EMTs and paramedics, and then once they finish their training, then their wages change to coincide with their new training. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Daniel?
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Item 8 is consider consent calendar. We have 8.1 through 8.5 tonight. Does council wish to remove any of those items and discuss them individually? We have our approval of the agenda, the minutes, an abatement, a resolution, and some amended resolution from last meeting. How about anybody in the public? Bonnie, what do you have, ma'am?
Here's some discussion on 8.5.
There's a request for 8.5 to be removed is the best way to handle that. Anything else removed from consent calendar? Is there a motion on the consent minus the 8.5?
I'd move to approve the consent calendar minus 8.5.
Got a first? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Got a second by Tony. Any last discussion, public or council? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. Please note unanimous for the roll call on the minutes, please. 8.5 was requested to pull off. I guess I will summarize it, and Daniel, please step in if you need to. But basically what happened is last meeting we brought this resolution forward. There was a couple of different choices of what we included on that resolution. And when it was published with the choices instead of the exact what the council decided. As far as substantive change, there is none compared to what was the action already that was included in last meeting. But it's just for clarity and cleanup that we have the right resolution with just the one choice that council decided. Is that clear as mud, Bonnie? You're not looking like you're letting us see.
I was kind of wondering why we were only showing one option in the documentation here at the point of approval.
Yep.
So actually, thought maybe I was missing a page.
It was the November 7th meeting, and in that it was published with both options. So you caught that. Understood. Any other discussion on 8.5? The amended resolution. Is there a motion for resolution 2022-60?
So moved.
Got a first by Preston,
Second.
second by Angela. Any last discussion, council or public? All those in favor of the motion to approve the amended resolution, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Opposed to no. That motion carries. 8.5 is approved. Item 9 is approval of the claims. Towards the end of the year here, and as Daniel mentioned in this morning's meeting, department heads are doing a good job, and we're staying right on budget and even below budget in some places. So questions, comments, concerns from council on the claims this go around? How about public questions, comments, concerns? None being heard, is there a motion on the claims?
I move to approve the claims.
We have a first,
Second.
we have a second. Any last discussion?
Glad to see the popcorn.
All those in favor of the motion to approve the claims as stated, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Opposed to no. Claims are paid, and please note unanimous for roll call. No public hearings tonight under 10, which brings us to 11, which is reports. 11.1 is request to be on the agenda by Mr. Klima for sewer to his property. We'll turn it over to you, Ryan. Yes, please.
So in January, we bought a piece of property up on the end of Edmonds Street, and we're trying to figure out how to get sewer up there. It was said that the city was gonna run sewer from the last manhole, which is way down by the other trailers that are still in there, up to our lot. We were informed it was gonna be done last April, and then we were, because when I bought it, I was told it was gonna be done. I didn't know I had to do anything. Now they're saying that they want, or that the city wants to give us a right-of-way through our property there, which we're okay with, but we don't want to wait a year or 2 years down the road, because Rick Bush has told us a couple days ago that there's no money in the budget to have that done. So it could be who knows when before it can be done, till you can join it with some other project to get that done. So we wanted to see if we could get septic put up there, because there's septic all the way around us, every side. So we wanted to see about getting approved for septic, and then getting water brought up from below up to our property on the, because we own the whole thing where the 3 trailers are below, and then all the way up the hill. We want to build a house on top. Either build a house or bring a trailer house in, because right now it's zoned for mobile home. So if we don't have to change any zoning, it's already zoned for a mobile home if we put a double wide or something up there. Main thing is we want to do is we want sewer, so we can move our family up there.
And that's on the north side of the creek. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Yep.
That on the corner, Fort.
It's on, yeah, 14th Street. There's right now, I don't know how many, if there's 10 houses up there. They drive across our property right there to get to their house. And, we were gonna give a right-of-way, which would allow them to get to their house, because right now they don't have access to their house, because that's my road and there's no easement. And there's no prescriptive easement, because there's been signs up there for who knows how long, because Genter was a smart man, and he put signs up, says, this is a private drive, you can drive across it. So ever since the road washed out coming across from Runnings, they've been going across my property, which there's no easement there for them to come across it. So that's why we were looking at giving a right-of-way so those people get to their house.
So basically, we can't start building our dream home, obviously, until we get the water and the sewer figured out, which we had an agreement with the city. Yes, we'll give you a right of way. But when I talked to Rick Bush a couple days ago, he's like, and we have everything in writing from George Genter's attorney, which is who we bought the property from. He's like, well, yes, we'll do it. He's like, but it's such a small job. I don't think anyone's going to bid to do the job. So we can't tell you when that would be done. And so he said we might have to tie it in with a bigger project, maybe next summer, maybe the summer after that. So we might be waiting another 2 years to build our dream home, when all we really need is just, if we could get septic up there, we could do that on our own, and we wouldn't have to wait for anyone, and then the city would still get there right away.
Well, we look into the right-of-way thing. I mean, right now, that right-of-way is kind of my only pull to try and get my stuff done up there on my property. Because, I don't know, you can't landlock somebody, but somebody is supposed to fix that road across there, which I don't know who, nobody's taken claim to that road across. That road, there's a ingress, egress easement for those people to get to their house, and when that road's washed out, they have no way to get there without going across my property.
You're talking 14th.
Well, no, the end of Ellen Street ends, 14th Street goes up the hill to the top of our property,
Okay.
but Ellen Street goes, and then it just ends. And then it's my property, and then they've been driving across my property since the road washed out to get to their houses. But that's my only, I don't want to say I'm going to put a fence across there so those people can't get to their house so that I can get sewer to my property. I just want sewer of some sort, and the easiest to me would be like a $10,000 septic system, as opposed to, I was told at one point $100,000 to get sewer over my property down the city street there. If we get septic, it would be really easy for us. There's already water and septic on my property already, because there's the 3 trailers down below where the city engineer lives.
But they're grandfathered in.
Yeah, there's already septic on the property.
But that's not the property that's for sale, isn't there?
That's the one
property
that-
for sale.
That is the
right
one
up-
for sale. We own,
It's ours. We put it up for sale just because we were wondering how much we could get for it in this market, just out of curiosity. But
No
yeah,
bites.
we've had a lot of bites, but nothing substantial.
By state law, with sewer within a certain amount of feet.
yep, I
There's
already
the
looked that up
required-
too.
400.
400 feet is
It's
the
within
distance.
400 feet of the build site, which we're well over 400 feet from the city sewer line.
Because that's,
Go ahead, Eric. It'll go.
can you hear me? Because actually, under state law, there's the class 1 municipalities used to be 250 feet, but now they're class 1 municipalities are exempt from that 250-foot requirement. However, in our ordinance, it has, if you're within 400 feet, you're required to hook onto the city sewer.
That's 400 feet from the build site, not from the property line.
I'd have to double check the ordinance. There's some language in there from the property line versus, so I mean,
I mean, if somebody owned a 1 mile square piece of property and your sewer's at the edge and their house is on the other end, you have to require them to go a mile across their property with sewer.
I would have to look.
I'm pretty sure it says build site when I looked at I talked to the state a long time ago when I bought the property. I think it's from the actual build site.
We spoke to
I would
someone in
have to see
here.
what our ordinance says.
And that's the difference you're saying, Eric, is between state law and what our ordinance states.
Yeah. 'cause
State law exempts it because we're Class A.
Yeah, so there's no specific requirement, but ultimately it's left to the discretion of the city to regulate their own. And the current city has the 400-foot requirement for hooking onto sewer.
Because I measured it the other day, it's like 370 feet or something like that from the sewer hole to my property line.
So you want to build your house on the corner of Ellen and 14th?
No, I want to build it on the top of the hill. So it's,
Where the big boulder's at.
yeah, you have to go
I'm
up,
just-
you have to go up 14th Street there. And see where that big white spot is right there on the left?
Right here?
Yep, right
Okay.
up in that area.
I think so. Nope, that's
You know, it's
fine.
basically looking over the top of the hill from the
Okay.
top.
So you're actually up above them 3 on the.
Yeah, way up on top.
And where was the manhole?
The manhole is down by the last trailers coming out of Genter's. So if you go down to Ellen Street, like on the corner of 14th and Ellen where my lot line is, go 350 or 60 feet to the east, and that's where the last manhole is, way down by the other trailers.
Okay, more towards that cul-de-sac.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, it's a long ways.
How many building sites are there on your property?
It's all one lot. Right now, it's all one lot.
Okay.
It's 4.4 acres.
Oh,
And we have 3 trailer houses at the bottom, because right now it's all zoned mobile home, which if we can put if we can't build a house there, we're gonna put a double wide or something up on top, on a foundation probably.
Can you, are you planning on selling lots in the future?
We've thought about it, and then we've thought about putting a trailer court up there too, but either way, we're gonna have to have sewer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather build my dream home on top of the hill looking out over town.
Understand.
And originally, when we put the place up for sale, we listed it high because we didn't want to sell it. I just wanted to put a big for sale sign up there with our information, because we're both realtors now. And 2 days after I put it up there, it was graffitied over. I don't know if
Yeah,
anybody
did
ever
you guys
seen the
see that?
graffiti. But I had a 8 foot by 20 or 8 foot by 16 foot sign, and the whole thing got covered with paint.
During rally. Yeah.
So I haven't put it back up again yet.
So basically, all we're asking for is to be able to do septic, and then, you know, we'll most likely grant the right of way. We just kind of want, that's all we want. Because we've been waiting a long time. We've been waiting since April, and
Yeah.
nothing's been done.
Those lines are not in the right spot, because I actually own, if you go to the left, I own the road over there too. My property cuts both roads. You know, I own, but I think there's an ingress egress easement on the, if you go to the left where where it comes across the creek. See that needs to go, that purple line needs to go up to the other side of that road.
The purple line?
That branch out should be covering the road, but
Oh, yes.
And for some quick clarification, we did locate the ordinance. It's 110504, and it does require 400 feet from the property line.
okay, so if it's different than the state, then the city trumps the state?
Yeah, the
Okay.
state basically granted the city the discretion to.
Well, if
Okay.
that's the case and we can't do septic, well, I'd like to get sewer put up to my property then, so that I can build a house up there.
And so the only reason you wanted to do septic was just for time?
Yeah, because I don't want to wait till who knows when to get,
Yeah.
you know, they're gonna have to dig up the middle of Edmonds Street through the concrete, you know, through the paved road all the way up to our property to get septic up there.
It sounded like it could be a year, 2 years. I mean, it was so indefinite, and that's why we bought the land, because we want to build our house. And we're prominent members of the community. We have 8 rental properties here. You know, we pay our taxes, we pay our dues, and we just want to have our awesome house, and we love the city of Sturgis, and this is where we want to stay. This is where we want to build roots.
We bought the property in January, a year ago, so it's almost been a year now. And, I mean, those 3 trailers on the bottom, there's a septic there already. The trailer up there on the right side corner there, that's in the city limits, there's septic there, but these are, you know, they're grandfathered in. There's septic on the other, I mean, all the way around that spot where we want to build our house is septic running all over the place.
Well, if you wanted to expand in the future and do like a trailer court or something, you would probably want sewer
Yeah.
Right.
up there,
Yeah.
not just septic.
It's hard to tell how steep that hill is from that picture, but it's pretty good. It's way up there in the air. And I would like to keep those 3 trailers there. Well, there's 3 families that live there, and they all own their own houses. But I also wondered if I got rid of those, could I just use that septic that's already there? Because there's already a septic on the property.
We'd rather not.
Ultimately, I'd
uproot
rather
those
have city
people
sewer,
from their
but-
home. That's not what we want to do.
Well, either way, the line has to be put in. So what I'm hearing you say is you're willing to put the line in from your building site down to where these trailers intersect.
From where my trailers are there?
Yes.
Yeah, I've already got an easement when we bought the property going up the east side of 14th Street across the other people's property to put the sewer and stuff up the hill to our property.
Okay.
So the city was only going to come up to our lot line.
I think a couple of clarifications. Typically, the developer, which you would be the developer if you're doing anything to further develop your property, you're required to extend the sewer We had made a deal or had been talking with Doc Jenner and Nate Jolly prior to you guys buying the property. And the city, we had agreed that we were gonna extend the sewer to the property line down to that intersection, but in lieu of that, we needed to have that right of way so that we could protect those property owners. So it's kind of two different,
Yeah, I
we're
know.
talking about two different things.
Right now, I could go put a fence across that line. Those people couldn't get to their
Right,
house.
exactly, and that's why the city was gonna, at our expense, extend the sewer down. Traditionally, it would be the developer's expense to extend no different than any of the other developers or developments that are happening in the city. It's always at their expense to extend the sewer. Like I said, we had said we would do that in lieu of having that right-of-way dedicated so that we could protect that access to those people that are up there, because the 15th Street crossing had washed out. And they're right, we've been working on this for, geez, I
Since
bet 2
April.
That was
years.
before I bought it in
Yeah,
January.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
I've got the letter here from you stating that you're gonna do it.
That's from Laura, yep.
Well, let me see.
That's if the right-of-way was
Right,
dedicated.
this was
Yes.
the minutes of the meeting that we had with
Yeah.
Nate and Dr.
And I-
Jenner. It was me and Daniel.
To
and-
make sure
and
it,
Dave.
Well, this is from Rick
everyone
Bush right
hears, that was a meeting more than a year ago, and at that time, we said if the right-of-way was dedicated, then the city would proceed with the project to extend the sewer lines to that point. At this point, no right-of-way has been dedicated. We haven't been told that that's going to happen, so no
I've already told
project
him
has
that we would
started.
Do it, but I'm not gonna do it until I know that I'm gonna get sewer.
So
So how do we go about
if a
doing it?
developer wants to do that, then we can start the process to start doing the sewer line. But that was something that we brought up again when we met with the previous owners more than a year ago, that we would do that if there would be right-of-way dedicated. So at this time, that still hasn't happened, and so that's why no progress has been made towards it.
So there needs to be an agreement discussed is what it comes down to.
I mean, is it, even though there's an ordinance that says you can't have a septic, is it possible to get a variance for that?
We can't spot variance and. Come on up, Dave, yep.
So,
He's loud enough, you don't need
All right. So 110506 on-site wastewater disposal. In the event the public sanitary sewer is not available under the provisions of this section, the building sewer can be constructed to a private wastewater disposal system that is in compliance with the title. They're 370 some feet from the 400, so it's really close. And I guess it would be something to allow them to have that, since there's already septic up there, until we had the project so they could build their home. Just my thought. But you guys are ultimate the decision makers. It's within 25 feet.
Well, procedurally, go ahead, Mike.
I don't see a problem. I really don't, given the variance.
It's a possibility.
Thank you, Dave.
Where does the 320 feet run to?
From the manhole to the edge of the property line is 320 feet.
Is that according to the lines there? Because
322 feet.
that purple line is off by 50 feet probably, so I don't know how accurate those lines are.
That's
that-
going to be to this point right here. As far as the actual property lines, that's dependent on the pictometry service that does this. And
Because that purple
where
line is
the,
supposed to be on the north side
Sure.
of that road.
no, that's dependent on the air service that actually completes the project. But as far as, a linear line between one point and another, that's pretty close to correct.
So future projects of sewer on the north side of the creek, if we came to an agreement with the Klimas to extend that service to the property line, if there was a right-of-way agreement and development agreement put together there, how would that affect future sewer projects? Would it be in line with that, or would it be specific to just this one property?
we could probably do it either way, and like I explained to Haley, you know, that small of, to put in 300 feet of sewer line, we're probably not gonna get big contractors to come in and put a bid on that. So one of the options that I had discussed with them is, and when we put in this new sewer interceptor line, maybe we could piggyback on that. We've had to do that here the last couple of years on some other projects. For example, the entrance off of the soccer field parking lot, we couldn't get anybody to bid on it because it was too small of a project. We've been working on that for probably 3 years, so we ended up having to piggyback that into the East Main project just so that we're able to get a contractor to look at it. So we certainly could put plans together if that's the direction of the council. Like I said, typically the developer would probably put an agreement together. We can do that. We probably wouldn't have it out to bid before spring at this point in time, being that it's the middle of December. We could put it out to bid, see what we get for bids. There's no guarantee, but likely it still would not be done even at that time frame till late summer, early fall would be what we're looking at for construction, just given that it's December already.
Okay, so if I put the sewer line in myself, you know, I've got friends that are contractors. I've dug a lot. We dug the line in on Hope Street. We did our own sewer line through there when we had the problem with the road up there before. If I could do it myself, if I go get licensed to do it and bonded.
If you're a licensed plumber, a plumber under the state standard of plumber, which is not necessarily a house plumber, but it means that you're able to make those connections onto a public system, then yes, you could do that. You'd have to be licensed and bonded.
So if I can get somebody to do it, I can run it myself and I don't have to give it right away.
You can do that. We would have to approve the plans of it, and the DNR, it has to go to DNR for their approval as well. I mean, there's a lot of steps that go into it. It's not just going out and buying the pipe and putting it in the ground. There's a lot of steps that go along with that.
I don't think that we want to come to this like stalemate. You know, we don't want to be at odds with anybody. We just want what we want, and we want to give y'all what you want and just have this peaceful exchange. I like Dave's idea where maybe we could do septic until we could do a sewer. But we are willing to give the right of way if we can get what we want to. It's, you know, it's unfortunately it's a quid pro quo. But we're not like, we don't want to be like, well, you know, we're not trying to have any kind of animosity or, you know, trying to be vindictive. We just want to build our house. That's it.
You guys would be okay, I guess, just for clarity, with the temporary fix of a septic system that would cost you $10,000 possibly, is what you stated, until future sewer connections are put in place. I mean, I'm just trying to work through the process and make sure everybody's on the same page.
Right.
What I'm hearing is it'd be at least a consideration by you to temporarily have a septic system until the full system of the interceptor was put in place.
Yeah, I should find out the septic down below there because it's running 3 houses already. If we could hook into that one, I don't know if it's big enough or if there's 1 or 3 or what.
It's not. We've been, just from past experience, we've had problems with that.
Okay. I don't even know if there's 1 or 3.
There's 1 for the 3.
Okay.
The cost of the septic is not an issue for us.
How about hooking up to the sewer when it becomes available after you put in the septic system?
I mean, can you give me a ballpark on what that might cost?
You know, if they were to put a tee off onto the private property where we could just get our own done, because my uncle, he does does lines to run down. We already discussed how to go down that steep hill. We're gonna go down that on the east side of 14th Street.
So that
we'd
would be the consideration too. I mean, once we extend the sewer and it's there, the other 3 trailers would have to hook on too, because that same requirement. Right. So you'd end up having to hook on all 4 of the residents.
And you did mention that to me. Yeah.
So is it reasonable to put this back to staff and work out the agreement and possibly bring it back as an agenda item that we can consider action on? Yes.
Yeah, we definitely could work with them to get a development agreement put together and present it at a future council meeting.
Before we make the agreement, we need to put a timeline to it, a suspense date, so these folks know when we'll get back with them.
I appreciate that.
When they do this city, are they going to require the wheelers to hook onto it too? Do you know? The ones in the other trailer house right on the right, top right-hand corner there?
They would,
No, on the top.
they would never be able to make any more improvements to their existing system, so they
Okay.
can, yes.
Because I was gonna talk to them about combining our sewer coming down the hill, so we could just split the
water's already
cost.
there, your water line goes right up and down.
Because if we could split the cost going down the hill, because we could just have one line going down the hill.
Mr. Mayor, just a couple quick comments. I think that, one, if there is an agreement with the prior owner, then why can't the same agreement be offered to Mr. and Mrs. Klima? Two, I think that, my opinion, we should find an agreement that is mutually beneficial. You know, certainly I want you all to be able to use your property, enjoy your property. And so I think that we need to find something that will allow them to build their home at a reasonable time. And, you know, if it's something that we can assist with, then that's what we need to be doing.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, are you gonna make the motion? And if you do,
No need for action, just direction is what we're looking for here.
let's get the direction
Get
out
something
there, the
started.
key points, so it's on the record.
To me, the key points would be, you know, developing the agreement between the city and the Klimas on the sewer and the street right-of-way, and bringing it back to council for consideration as soon as it takes. I mean, how long do you suspect that would be?
I would say by the first meeting in January.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah. And
That's pretty fast.
I'd like to get an estimate as to what it would cost to do that through there, because it'd be nice to have it done. If I'm gonna put 10,000 into a septic, and I'm gonna be required to hook onto the city anyway, if we could take that 10,000, put it towards getting this septic in there, getting the city sewer in, as opposed to just throwing away $10,000.
Well, that's why I brought that point up, because it was
Put
temporary.
together a cost estimate, just, granted, it's gonna change from month to month to month.
I think the main issue with that, though, is we're not going to be able to provide a guarantee of when that service is going to be installed. I mean, so it's not even as much on the cost. It's going to be, it could be 9 months, it could be 18 months. And that's something that is outside our control, that it's going to be up to if there's private contractors out there willing to construct
Or
it.
if I was to get a,
We'd probably
Get a
have,
license to do
a good 90 days of engineering on it, and then we have to submit it to DNR. That's another,
2 months.
yeah, it may be 2 weeks, but it may be 2 months.
Yeah.
Once we get those back, then we'd have to put it out to bid. You got about a 45-day bidding process by the time we get it in the newspapers and do a public bid opening, and you get it back to you guys to open it up. It's not a fast process when we go that way. That's why traditionally, like I said, the developer, they can speed that up a little bit.
that's what I was thinking, if I just took that 10,000 and put it towards, if I was.
You could
I
do
mean,
that, yeah.
I-
You still would need to have fully engineered plans and still submit those to DNR, or DANR. But with that being said, developers legally can move faster than what a city can.
And there's probably a 60-day, maybe a 90-day, if you wanna build a stick-built home, it's gotta be rezoned, so you gotta go through that process.
Actually, Garrett figured that out, they don't have to rezone it.
Oh, they wouldn't?
They can build a house up there.
Oh, that's excellent.
Well, it's getting easier by the
that's
second.
That's excellent.
I don't think you have
Okay.
to describe all that. If it's fine, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Well, I agree with Councilor Zerp's comment that, why don't we extend the same agreement from the previous property owner to the current?
That was just the dedication of the right-of-way, and then we get started on the engineering. So the plat, we need to see a plat, and then that would get the ball rolling.
But under our parameters, which is a lengthy process.
Correct. And we'd hoped that we were gonna do this 18 months ago,
So if
but
I
we
was,
never ever got the plat from Doc and Nate to begin any of this.
so if I was to line up getting the construction done, getting the sewer put over there, would the city be willing to help pay for the cost if I give that right away? Otherwise, there's no reason for me to give a right away if I have to do all the work and pay myself.
I think that'd be part of the agreement, but I think it's a sensible ask. I think there's,
It'd be a hell of a lot cheaper if I did it than if.
That's something, Mr. Mayor, I think that could be considered, but you still have to legally see how you can do that. The city can't just say to an individual, you know, we'll cover everything minus 10 grand or something.
Yeah, I'm just throwing ideas
Yeah,
up in the
so
air.
that's something that would take the city attorneys a little while to.
We probably won't be
find
building
a
a
way to
house
finish
this
that.
winter, but we would like to start when it starts getting nice out again.
Yeah.
So it's not like we weren't going to start building a house tomorrow.
I
We
think,
just want to get something started so we know, because she wants me to get rid of the property because she don't think it's ever going to get done.
well, I think the next sensible step is to, again, meet with staff and try to figure out a plan of attack and an agreement that gets both the right of way and the sewer handled from both sides. And I think it's a sensible way to approach it. Like's been stated, if we go through our process to extend the sewer, it's going to take a lot longer. So I think the key is the agreement between you folks in the city of Sturgis, and we'll have you meet with staff to start working that out. And Rick and Daniel love adding stuff to their plate, and this has been on there, so they want to get it off.
I mean, like,
Right.
the agreement, I guess, is fairly done. I mean, we've already had it.
I'm used to dealing with City of Newell and Nislin, and I just go do the work and ask later.
I think the communications back and forth and get an agreement
Mhm.
that everybody's happy with. I think that's the first step. And
'Cause I'd much rather have city sewer if I have to hook up to it anyway than
Well, that's
spend
why I brought
10,000 and
that
then
up,
9
yeah.
months later have to redo it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any other discussion? I think we have some direction, and I think obviously we have some work ahead of us yet, but I think
Yes,
there's
I
a
think
solution.
everybody has my phone number.
It's on a sign everywhere.
Yeah. It was until I got graffitied over. Anyway.
Well, there's other ones.
You can see the billboard up there that I put from the down below. You can't see it on that picture, but you can see it from the highway from down below.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
Item 11.2 is presentation of the 2022 Bridge Inspection Report, and Bros Engineering is here to, you got a thick packet for us, but good stuff.
Alrighty, thank you. I am Doug Wessel with Bros Engineering. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for selecting Bros Engineering to perform your bridge inspections. I believe in your packet you were actually given the bridge inspection reports for like 15, 20 pages each one. My intent is not to go through these things page by page.
Thank you.
Yeah. Instead, you do have a summary report that we kind of put together. And so I just kind of like to briefly go through that a little bit. Starting ahead, there was 8 total structures inspected. Overall, your guys' structures are in good condition. Our inspections did not result in any findings that would require immediate repairs. There are recommendations given, you can see on that summary sheet, that were made which would extend the life of the structure or are considered more of a cosmetic nature. So if we start going through those, that summary sheet, first one is structure number 47009-426. That is on the Whitewood Service Road. That's a triple 10x4 precast box culvert. It's over the tributary to the Bear Butte Creek. It was built in 2006. It is open to legal loads. The box culvert is in good condition. There was one approach and signing recommendation given. It said install type 2 object markers at the northwest and southeast corners. This Whitewood Service Road is posted for a speed limit of 40 miles an hour. So object markers are not required by the signing guidelines, but they could be installed for visual guides only. So I was just put out there. Any questions on that particular structure? Okay, if not, we'll move on to structure 47014-427, also on the Whitewood Service Road. That is a 100-foot 3-span continuous concrete bridge at a 45-degree skew over Bear Butte Creek. This structure was built in 2006, and it is open to legal loads. We did have some preservation and general maintenance repair recommendations. One of them was repair the spalls on top of all the 4 wing walls. if you guys looked in those significant findings with the pictures, the first two, you can sure see the cracks and the map crackings on top of that at the intersection of the back wall. Now this truthfully is a very hard area to repair because typically there is some movement that may occur between the wing walls and the back wall. So if you put a rigid repair there, it'll just continue to crack. So this could possibly be maybe an epoxy grout application, but that is something that we would look into as far as what exact material would need to be put there.
That's not the driving surface, right?
No, that's just on top of top of the wing wall. Yep. We did have another preservation general maintenance recommendation. It says route and seal cracks in the deck and approaches. Typically, your concrete slabs, they will crack, concrete cracks. This is the way it is. So the recommendation is to put a polymer chip seal on top of the slab and the approach slabs to stop the water from seeping in there. Now, particularly since this is a road that gets salt application on it, that can get down into the rebar and would further increase the rate of deterioration. We had on approach and signing recommendations, we had a mill and seal asphalt approach adjacent to the concrete approach slabs. Basically, that is a growth joint that gets filled with bituminous, and as movement occurs, the bituminous gets a bump in it. That's your notorious bump on and off. And so to do that, you just basically mill that down and then seal it so you don't get more water seeping into that bituminous. This is just more of a ride characteristic repair. Again, we have the installed delineators and type 3 object markers on the corners. Again, this is 40 miles an hour, so that's not required. It's just it would be installed for visual guides only. We have another one, repair damaged approach rail. The southwest guardrail W beam has an 11-foot tear in it. Looks like it's due to an apparent vehicle collision. The adequacy, the strength of the railing W beam itself has not been compromised, but this would just be a cosmetic repair. Then we also have some channel and or berm recommendations. The recommendation was place additional large riprap in the channel beneath the structure. If you go back to these significant findings on the second page, you can see there's been quite a bit of erosion on the berm there. That has actually removed part of the berm, and the riprap that was on the berm is gone. So the repair recommendation there is to reconstruct the berm and install riprap to the original configuration. Now, in speaking with city staff, we have, 4 or 5 things there that would be repair recommendations. This structure would qualify for what they call a big preservation grant. And those big preservation grants are, if the city would get selected, are split that the state pays 80%, the city pays 20%. City staff has asked me to put together the application for you guys' consideration at your next meeting in 2 weeks. The applications are due to the state January 2nd. So once we put together the application, you will have a resolution in front of you to you guys consider, and then if you do that, all you need to do is sign the resolution, pass and sign the resolution, and then we get maintenance records from the city. You get that back to me, and I'll take care of the application submittal. So I try to make it as easy as possible for you guys. So
That goes back to the days when there was the wheel tax was first implemented. Is that correct, Steve?
yes, that's 2016 they started.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the cities are exempt from the wheel tax because you guys can't have a wheels tax. So,
But we pay it when we.
oh yeah, you guys pay it.
We have opportunity to use that big grant because
we
of the
do.
county's wheel tax, though, right? That's
Well, actually, the county, you can use it anyway, even if the county didn't have it.
oh,
The
interesting.
cities automatically qualify for it. So that's kind of what's going to happen with that one on the Whitewood Service Road, the 14427. So at your next meeting, like I said, you guys will have an application in front of you for consideration. Does anybody have any questions on that particular structure? Okay, that one's going to take the longest, so the other ones go a little quicker here. The next structure is 47024, 427 on 9th Street. That is a 136-foot two-span pre-stressed girder bridge with a concrete deck. That's also over Bear Butte Creek. That was built in 2019. It is open to legal loads, and as you would expect with a newer structure, there are no repair recommendations.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Next one, moving along, is structure number 47030, 429. That one is on Junction Avenue. That is a 166-foot four-span continuous concrete bridge, also over Bear Butte Creek. That structure was built in 1998. It's open to legal loads. Good, it's in good structure with no repair recommendations. Moving on to 47031, 438 on Fulton Street. That is an 18 by 8'6" single barrel reinforced concrete box culvert with concrete lined channel at a 36-degree skew over Dead Man Gulch. That one was built in 1979. It is open to legal loads. Now, we do have preservation and general maintenance recommendation. It says route and seal cracks in the floor of the box and then seal the floor of the box. Now, basically, we're seeing some transverse cracks in the bottom slab of the box culvert, which typically is not abnormal. Normally, those cracks will get filled with dirt or debris, and they somewhat seal themselves. So this is just kind of a recommendation for consideration. Just kind of a notice, hey, those cracks are there. I mean, if you wanted to seal it, you could, but this is just for consideration. Another one is we have a channel and or berm recommendation. It says consider resealing the joints at the end of the box culvert aprons. Basically where the concrete aprons and then the concrete panels of the channel abut one another, there is a construction joint which is sealed. Well, that silicone seal has basically come out. So our recommendation is if you want to reseal that, then just to stop the water from infiltrating down in there. Now, there is going to be a cutoff wall at the end of that apron. So in any kind of water that would get there and pump out the material, it's not going to get underneath the cutoff wall and compromise the structure in any way. It's just would just be on that concrete panel there. Like I said, it's just for consideration. It's just something to consider. Then moving on, we have on the same structure, we have consider sealing the channel and canal bottom. Just same things. We're seeing some cracks there. Typically, again, it'll get filled with dirt and debris. So it's just for your consideration is all. Does anybody have any questions on the Fulton Street structure?
For clarity, that's over the Dead Man Channel you stated.
Yep.
Does that, and Ricky might have these answers too, does that affect anything with the Army Corps of Engineers when we do that study that's done by them annually? And
Correct. So every year the Corps of Engineers comes through and inspects it and makes recommendations, and actually some of what they identified in their report has already been corrected based on the Army Corps of Engineers report that we've done this year already on some of the caulking and some of the small repairs. So yeah, they overlap each other.
yeah, and that was my question, if some of that's already been addressed, basically. Yep.
Okay, so moving on then, we'll go to basically the sister bridge, 47031, 439 on Marshall Street. This is once again, it's an 18-foot by 10-foot single barrel reinforced concrete box culvert with a concrete lined channel at a 30-degree skew over Dead Man Gulch. It was built in 1979, the same year. Basically, it's open to legal loads. This one we have a preservation and general maintenance recommendation of patch spalled areas on wall at northeast corner. There is a drain pipe that comes in at that location that we are seeing some spalls underneath there, just basically from water trickling down and doing that. An epoxy grout could be put on that. Basically apply that to protect the reinforcing from any kind of rusting or deterioration that might happen. Another one is we have considered sealing the floor of the culvert. Again, just the cracks. Once again, you know, you're going to get the dirt and debris down in there, but that's just for consideration. And also too, you see the failing silicone on the end of the aprons. Again, it's the same situation I just talked about. That's just for consideration. Any question on the Marshall Street one? Okay, if not, we'll move to 47032, 429 on Sly Street. This particular structure consists of 6 galvanized corrugated metal arch pipes with galvanized steel sheeting head walls. These pipes were installed in 2013. It is open to legal loads. And once again, the metal pipes and the head walls were in good condition. We did have one approach and signing recommendation that says install delineators and type 3 object markers at the corners. Sly Street is posted for 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, so once again, object markers are not required by the signing guidelines, but they could be installed as guidance, just for consideration.
I don't imagine you can have a good word with FEMA and have a.
And the last structure we got is 47033, 449 on Vanacker Canyon Road. This one is a twin 10-foot by 5-foot precast box culvert at a 41-degree skew over Vanacker Creek. It was built in 2015. It is open to legal loads. The precast box culvert is in relatively good condition. There was one general preservation, general maintenance. We do have some spalls occurring in a particular barrel unit in the north barrel. The spalls are on the underneath of the top slab or ceiling of the box culvert, you want to call that, which has exposed some reinforcing steel. So once again, an epoxy grout could come in there to cover that up to protect the reinforcing steel from any kind of further rusting or deterioration. Like I said, that's the last one, so unless you guys have any questions at all for me.
Well, we got work to do on Whitewood Service Road, it sounds like.
Yeah, just
bring
that
that
one.
back,
Yep,
yeah.
we'll put together that, and you know, basically those preservations are nice. It's a newer structure, and you know, why not protect it while you can?
And you're going to call FEMA.
I'll leave that up to you guys.
I figured that was the answer.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. So again, for clarity, expect some further action for an application for the possible grants with the state and then 80-20 with the city match in the 20. So we'll bring that forward here in the near future. No action needed. No, nope. So that brings us to 11.3, Resolution 2022-67. This is a supplement to the budget. This is 4 grants. And Mr. Ainsley, I'll turn it over to you for a staff report here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The cities in the state are allowed to supplement your budget through a simple resolution when that supplement comes from either insurance funds or grants. So, for example, when you adopt a budget, which our city always adopts a budget by September of the year preceding the current budget year, when you do that, you don't necessarily anticipate certain grant funds that maybe the city receives, and you definitely don't anticipate insurance settlements from hail damages or the trucks that happen to hit traffic lights or anything like that. Bridges. And as that occurs throughout the year, we collect the insurance money from those things. We make the repair. Well, we make the repairs first. Then you collect the insurance money. And so what this action will do is just add the budget authority to allow what has already occurred to occur at the end of the year, just to make sure that the budget is in line. So this isn't actually adding any cash or anything else. All of these funds was cash that came into the city already and has been spent for those identified purchases. It's just aligning the budget with insurance settlements that occurred or grants that the city received. Are there any questions?
And on this number 67, it's simply 4 grants is what it is for. Yeah. Yep.
I'm sorry, it's just police. I'm sorry about the
radios.
Every year
then,
it's always insurance. I don't know why we didn't include.
Lisa didn't turn any in this year.
Come on, Lisa.
Any questions on this action to correct the budget for supplemental appropriations? public, or council? Is there a motion for Resolution 2022-67?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve Resolution 2022-67.
We have a first on the floor.
I'll second.
We have a second by Preston. Any last discussion, council or public? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. That resolution passes unanimously. Brings us to 11.4. This is first reading of the third supplemental appropriation for the budget. This is ordinance 2022-11. Back over to you, Mr. Ainsley.
Thank you very much. Just so everyone is aware, this is one of the more traditional sorts of supplementals, and so if the council approves it tonight, this will appear in next council meeting agenda as well. And so similar to what we've had supplementals in the past, every time we anticipate the amount of airport fuel that we will sell, we always underestimate that. We continue to have more and more usage at the airport, which is fantastic. And what that means is more and more people are fueling their planes there. And also the cost of fuel continues to increase. So we have purchased $18,000 of additional fuel beyond that. We do make a profit margin on that. And so there will be funds that will come to backfill that. With the auditorium, if you recall, the original supplemental that we did earlier this year added additional funds to cover the additional surcharges that were put in place by Black Hills Energy to cover the additional costs of the winter storm Uri. That's what it was called in Texas. That really increased natural gas costs. And so that was a surcharge that went into effect late last year, and then it continued through the first 6 months of this year. So we did supplement the budget for each of the departments, but when I was preparing that list, I left off the auditorium because that's the first one. And apparently when I put together the list, I left off the first department. So my apologies for that, but when we were going through, we do need a supplement of $18,000 to be able to cover those surcharges from the winter storm Uri.
Just $3,000 on that one. It's the $18,000 on the fuel, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, $3,000 on that. The staff report is wrong on that.
On the report, it's, yep.
On the report, it says 18. If you look on the actual ordinance, it's 3,000. I thought that seemed large, but that was a typo when I prepared the staff report. My apologies for that. Then under the city attorney department budget, there would be a supplemental of $18,000, $9,000 for salaries. That's due to wage adjustments that were done for our two attorneys. That salary survey was done after we had adopted the budget. So there were some increases that were made for the two attorneys, and then also $9,000 for professional fees. Many of that, or a lot of that, has been from filing and other things that occurred from just the amount of litigation that occurred this year. So $18,000 for those. Under the hotel occupancy, that is the hotel bid board. That is where every hotel in the city, every time a room is occupied, there's an additional $2 charge. That money goes into this hotel occupancy. Then the hotel owners meet about every 2 or 3 months. They review marketing initiatives and other things like that and use those funds to help pay for that, to hopefully increase occupancy for later in the year or the next year. What occurred in 2021 is that our occupancy was far higher than what we had ever had in the past. And so that led to a significant surplus in that budget, similar to what occurred in our sales tax in 2021, that we had a lot more in sales tax. Some of that sales tax happened because our hotel occupancy was so high. So the hotel bid board, similar to what the city council did earlier this year in approving a few additional projects to invest those additional sales tax funds, the hotel bid board invested that money in some additional advertising to try to increase occupancy in 2022 and 2023. So there was $10,000 higher in expenditures for advertising than what we traditionally budget for. But again, that came from additional surplus revenue that occurred in 2021. And then lastly, in the equipment replacement fund, when we budgeted for that, which it's important to note, we did not budget all the revenue, because in the equipment replacement fund, we are trying to build up surpluses so we can buy more expensive equipment later. But we did budget $30,000 for lawnmowers. In the end, when we actually ended up purchasing those this year, it was over $30,000. It was, I think, $30,800, $700. So we're just asking for a supplemental of $1,000. Again, we receive far more revenue in the equipment replacement fund than that, but we are asking for a $1,000 supplemental just to fully cover that purchase. Are there any questions?
I've got the comment that I'm glad we don't meet on the 31st like we used to at the end of the year. So it's much better to handle it the first meeting of the month versus have a special meeting on it.
Yes.
Yes. So questions, comments, concerns from the public or from council on this supplemental appropriation? Like Daniel stated, this is our actual budget ordinance and making that correct on the accounting side of it. This is a first reading consideration. There will be a second reading, then it'll be posted in the public newspaper and go into effect 20 days after that. No discussion being heard. Is there a motion on this first reading?
Mayor, I'll motion to approve budget ordinance 2022-11.
We have a first on the floor. Second. We have a second on the floor. Any last discussion? Public or council? Bonnie, what do you have? Thank you. See if it works.
I just want to say that over the time period that I've been observing and watching these things happen, that I'm impressed with how closely this all comes out and how explicable it is. That, you know, when I first started watching, it was sort of foggy and money was moving and, you know, it just left you uneasy and not sure what's happening. But each year, as we've done this, it's become clearer and more precise, and I'm fully amazed at how closely an operation the size of this, I mean, we're a small town, but still, this is a good-sized operation, how closely it comes out and how clearly Daniel is able to account for it. And just as a public listener, I appreciate that clarity and that evolution that I've seen happen in the process.
Thanks, Bonnie. Any other discussion? We have a first and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the passing this first reading, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. That motion carries, and we'll bring that back forward for a second reading. Item 11.5 is medical cannabis license renewals. Mr. Marshall's got our staff report on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The city's medical cannabis licenses are issued for a period of 1 year. Last year, the city issued 2 licenses. Both licenses were conditional, and the conditions have not yet been met. There has been an inquiry from one of the licensees about renewal, but no renewal application has been submitted and no renewal fee has been charged. The South Dakota Municipal League has a city attorneys association, and there's been chatter on its message boards about how to handle the issue of medical cannabis license renewal fees. And the opinions about those renewals run the entire continuum, saying that since most, if not all, cities initially issued a conditional fee, many conditions remain unsatisfied, that it would be inequitable to charge a renewal fee under those circumstances, the circumstances being first year, considerable unknowns, extensive investment required to achieve the license status. Other city councils take a more aggressive approach and assess the entire renewal fee, saying that it's a city fee. They knew it going in. If they wanted to continue to mine the opportunity that the city has granted them, then they should be willing to pay the freight. And of course, given it's a human decision, there are those who fall in the middle and impose half of the renewal fee allowed by ordinance, citing the special considerations of conditional license, first year unknowns, and substantial investment. I think as a matter of goodwill, the council should consider directing me to contact the two licensees to remind them of the requirement to submit a renewal application so they aren't blindsided if their conditional license is revoked or failed to renew at the end of the 1-year period, and that the council exercise its collective discretion in selecting what council believes is an appropriate renewal fee. I'd be happy to entertain any questions council may have.
What do you expect as far as time would take of yours to be able to pull this together?
Less than an hour.
Less than an hour. So a couple $100 would be more than adequate if we were going to assess an actual fee to the renewal?
I'm a fan of even number fees, $250, $500. If you're imposing a small fee, $250 would more than cover the actual time required, at least on my end, to do that work. There would also be time spent by finance office employees to get the renewal application out and process it once it comes back. So in fairness to the city, I don't think the fee should be zero. I think $250 or $500 might be a little light. I think half is not unreasonable. I think a quarter is not unreasonable. But I'm kind of a softy, and it's not my call, it's yours.
Well, keep in mind, we just passed first reading of a supplemental appropriation that had $9,000 of your department's wages, so.
And in the interest of complete transparency, I do not favor passing on that surcharge to licensees. Instead, I prefer to spread that across the entire spectrum of people receiving city services.
Appreciate it.
Mark, to clarify your comment, 1/4 of the original 7,500 is what you were referencing?
Yes, sir.
Have we ever had a situation where we've issued a conditional license before?
I think there are a number of conditional licenses that have been issued. Building permits are conditional because the construction has to satisfy the terms and conditions of the building code. So they contemplate satisfying implicit conditions. Liquor licenses are sometimes conditional in that they require the establishment of a physical location to link the license to. So it's not out of the ordinary to have a conditional license, Counselor.
And when those ones renew, I mean, have we ever done a reduced fee for anyone that's had a conditional license?
I do not know the answer to that question, but I think coming full circle, very few times have your licensees been in this situation where their investment has hinged on legislative action and the uncertainty of whether recreational cannabis would be allowed, and then the amount of build-out required to create a compliant location to sell the product.
I'm not against a reduced fee. I'm just worried about setting a precedent. But I guess if all that can be expressed as to why, I don't know. I'm just worried about precedent and, not charging the fees that we've established. So.
And that has been the point other municipalities have taken in assessing the full fee. Not to beat a dead horse, but it is a matter within the council's discretion as to what fee should be charged under this unique circumstance.
With the intention of your recommendation of allowing you to reach out to these licensees and have the discussion. But you need to have direction from us to have that discussion with them so they're not blindsided.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
The talking point or the examples that you gave previously were all alcohol-related licenses. Are those not those fees set by the state?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the source of those fees.
Renewals for alcohol licenses are, but as far as the initial, they are not. And then the building permits, I did check with Dave on that. The example that was brought up regarding commercial building permits, they actually have 2 years to comply, so those are conditional, but they would have 2 years to be completed. However, if it's not completed within 2 years, they have to reapply, and it would be the full cost of the permit. Again, we're not advocating for a full cost, just to answer your questions.
The licenses are still conditional and still waiting to meet the requirements.
I guess in this situation, to me, getting into, that business, they were taking on a risk, getting into the unknown, and it's no fault of the cities that they were not able to get everything up and going, so some kind of like 50-50 then split. I'd obviously prefer the fees that we set, but I understand.
I don't see where the city caused any failure. That's my point of view. The city is not at fault here.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
when is the renewal date for these licenses?
It's 1 calendar year after we put them in place, and that.
So is that
So
they are annual licenses that expire at the end of the calendar year, regardless of the date on which the conditional license was issued.
So after all that being said, we're gonna have a meeting December 31st. Just kidding.
Mr. Mayor, my opinion is that I don't think that we decrease the renewal fee. It is what we put into the ordinance. It is what the license holders knew coming into the process. As Councilor Bashan said, it is no fault of the city that they have not moved from conditional to active licenses. So I would support keeping the renewal fee at $7,500.
I'd second that.
So that was a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to keep the renewal fee of our medical or our cannabis licenses at $7,500.
We have a first by Becca.
I'll second that.
We have a second by Tony, with the direction sent to city staff to
Yes.
reach out to the
Yes,
licensees.
to please reach out, yes.
Any further discussion, public or council? We have a first and a second on the floor.
Do we have the opportunity to revisit the building code connections in that ordinance in this calendar year?
You'd have to have 2 readings and 20 days.
Well, let me rephrase that, next calendar year, 23. It's definitely been a point of discussion that I've brought up a number of times that the type of business has generated a building code benchmark that had to be met, that any other business of similar nature, different product but similar nature, is not required to meet, which is a significant investment.
If the council would like, you definitely can. Just, that's going to be a change in our priority list compared to what was adopted a month or two ago. But if the council wants to, we can swap that out with something else that was identified.
Do those vendors have an opportunity for a variance?
I thought
Theoretically, yes.
I thought it specifically said
I
that
thought
or
it-
not.
I thought
But I
we
could be
could.
making that up.
I remember we couldn't, I thought it stated. But
We can
I'm
look
going
at
off of
that and get
memory.
back to you.
So let's go back to the point of the renewal. But your point, well, is taken, Kevin, about the opportunity to reopen an ordinance that was created when, as we go through time, we may learn more things. So. But the first and the second on the floor is to leave the renewals at the cost of $7,500 as the original fee and to have Mr. Marshall have those discussions with the licensees. Any other discussion on it?
Well, is there an issue with the at least 45 days prior to the expiration, or will we have a problem with that? Because we're already within 30 days.
You can make a problem if you want one. And I don't mean to make light of the comment, but again, you're functioning under highly unusual circumstances. And I would suggest that as a matter of goodwill, that any failure to timely apply for a renewal can be overlooked, especially if they're paying their $7,500.
Answer your question?
Yes, noted.
Amanda, you had something to state. Come on up.
I just have a question on this type of license compared to like the alcohol licensing, and that those business owners receive a reminder for their renewal. So is this in similar nature to that, where they should receive it, or is that part of the unknown of the process?
The current ordinance does not have any provision imposing a reminder notice on the city for the medical cannabis licenses.
So the reminders for alcohol and those types come from the state,
That's from.
Yeah.
Send the applications to them.
Okay, so then because of the way the ordinance is set up, it would be up to the city or the individual to remember that they need to apply for the renewal.
The city occasionally does go above and beyond what's required to try to encourage people to get their applications in. We do that often for liquor as well as alcohol. We also do it for individuals that have not paid their water bill so that we avoid the turnoffs. But with that, it's not a guarantee that we're always going to do that, and there's nothing that requires the city to do that.
Okay.
So on the liquor and beer, we're not required to do that. If we have time, we do that as a courtesy, but no, we're not required to do that.
But we do send the application.
We send the
too.
application.
So that's gotta be a reminder, not that it's any good or anything.
Sure. I was just asking so we're consistent in helping our businesses, making sure that they're successful in doing. If there's another avenue we need to pursue to help them, make sure they need to be throughout their processes. I mean, that's something I can help look into, but thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Has there been any kind of conversation with the license holders as far as why their renewal application has not been received? Or
No,
not
nothing
sure
from
of
city
that?
staff to the licensees at this point. Is that, go ahead, Faye.
I did for Northern Hills, the one that's out by Willie's. He contacted me on Friday, said that he had tried to send all the paperwork to me, but it was a large file and I never did get it. So he was going to split it up and send it today, and I have not received it.
But per our ordinance, the payment also needs to be included with their
Correct,
with their renewal fee or their new renewal application.
Yes, Mr. Marshall did remind me of that.
Was it an electronic submission
Yes.
or a hard copy submission?
No, electronic,
Not through Citizen Serve, just through an email.
through an email.
Man.
So would we be possibly considering the renewal applications at the next meeting in 2 weeks? That's
Yes.
when,
Yep.
okay.
Yes. After Mr. Marshall has a chance to reach out.
Okay.
So when do they default? Is it
December 31st.
December 31st
is
or
when it
the
expires.
next meeting?
December 31st.
They're good through the 31st.
Not a lot of work days. Are we going to send them a reminder?
I'm going to get on the telephone. I find that that's sometimes an effective way of communication.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. It of course depends on whether there's a party on the other end willing to pick up the call.
They'll pick up the call before they pick up their mail.
Any other discussion? We got a first and a second on the floor
Call the question.
with direction for Mr. Marshall to reach out to the licensees with the renewal cost being $7,500, same as original application fee. With no other discussion being heard, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Opposed to no.
No.
I'm a no also.
I'm abstain.
We have an abstention, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 affirmative, 2 negative, 1 abstention. So with the sitting body of 7 currently, that's the majority and gives you direction, Mr. Marshall.
Majority of a quorum is all
Yep,
that's
yep,
required.
yep. So you have your direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and
Thank you. Item 11.6 is discussion and direction as to required modifications of city park entrances. And bro's already left. So we have multitude of discussions here. I didn't write down who I had for a staff report, but I think Smith and Ainsley were up for that, so.
Yeah, I drew the short straw.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, go ahead and start us off, Daniel, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As we have discussed several times in the past, after the flooding events of 2019, FEMA became far more interested in our community, and that isn't always necessarily a great thing. After the flooding events of 2019, the portion of FEMA that's the disaster recovery arm, their personnel were out on site within, I think, a week and a half, and they looked at those 2 crossings and said, yes, go ahead, proceed with making the repairs necessary. And so the city very quickly, we were able to get the repairs completed on those crossings. And since that time, we also have received reimbursement from FEMA for those repairs that were made. Unfortunately, the other half of FEMA ended up starting to look at that, at those crossings, along with the 7th Street crossing, and noted that those crossings, when they were originally installed several decades ago, that they were not permitted. And what permitted means is similar to the 7th Street crossing, and what we have explained for the past year and a half or 2 years is that whenever you design a crossing over a floodplain, you have to do a hydrological study to ensure that that crossing or that structure does not increase the base flood elevation of everything upstream. The city, at the time of building the 7th Street crossing, as well as the crossings into the city park, which are at Sly and Blanche, we did not go through that process. So we did not have a hydrological study done. We did not get it permitted through FEMA. We just proceeded to hurry and get it done because it was in the best interests of the residents. Well, unfortunately, if you do that, you also face some consequences. And so this is something that now has occurred. FEMA came to the city and said that we had to submit a conditional letter of map revision, or a CLOMAR, that would include a hydrological study that would show that there's no rise in that base flood elevation upstream, so that it does not affect any structure upstream of those structures. We hired Interstate Engineering. They completed a study, and that study showed that there was indeed a very small rise on a neighboring structure. And because of that, they were not able to submit a CLOMAR. And so, with that being said, we are not able to just ignore this. We essentially need to rectify or mitigate the situation. If we do not, then it's a long process, but over about the next year, the city as a whole would become non-compliant with FEMA's flood program. That may not sound like a big deal, but what that means is anyone who has flood insurance on their property, they most likely have it through the federal flood insurance program. So it's essentially subsidized. I know you're already paying a high rate, but the reality is it's subsidized. If you do not, or if a community is ineligible to participate in that, then anyone who has those policies, they would have to get one through a fully private insurer, which would be at a far higher cost. So of course, if you have a higher cost insurance, then that means the value of your home necessarily goes down. And unfortunately, Sturgis is blessed by having one of the highest percentages of our private properties in floodplains in the state. So this would affect a lot of properties in our community. So because of that, it really is necessary for the city to mitigate this. It's not something that we can just ignore and hope it goes away. We have to do something to make this right. Essentially, after looking at this with engineers and with planners and everything else, there are essentially 4 options, 2 of which we presented to the council several months ago. Since then, we've been able to look at it in more depth, more detail, and we've come up with an extra 2 options. We will admit none of the options are really good, and no one really wants to do any of them, but it's the reality that they have to be done, because if they are not, we are not going to be compliant, meaning we're not going to be able to participate as a community, not the city, but the private residents are not going to be able to participate in the federal flood insurance program. And so the first option is to contract with another engineering firm at a cost of about $100,000 to complete a CLOMAR. Essentially, we already did that with Interstate Engineering, and they said that there was a slight rise upstream. We could contract with another engineering firm to see if they come to the same conclusion. In all likelihood, they're going to. And so most likely we're going to be investing $100,000 for an answer that we already know is not going to be a viable answer. But with that being said, that is an option that we could do. But if that second hydrological study has the exact same results as the first one, then we would still have to do either option 2, 3, or 4. The second option is to remove the existing culvert crossings on Sly and Blanche, and then to construct a bridge across one of the entrances, likely Sly. That's the most heavily used crossing. Given the cost of the 2018 bid, we would expect the construction price to be about $1.7 million. The cost to remove the structures is estimated to be at about $100,000. So that would be a cost of about $1.8 million to do that. That would give you a bridge, and so there would be a single crossing over the creek. The issue with that, of course, is that there's one crossing, so if something ever happened, then you would be stuck on one side of the creek or the other. But that is one of the options. A bridge would be it would be built to a standard that a 100-year flood would not affect it, and so it would be just like the 9th Street Bridge that we built, except the span is actually a little less there. Again, we cannot guarantee that cost is $1.8 million. Just looking at what our costs have been and then looking at what inflation calculators are, that's kind of a rough estimate. And again, the really bad news is none of this has been budgeted, and so all of it would be coming out of our reserves. Just, again, to make sure everyone is fully aware of that. The third option, and this is a new option, would be to remove the existing culvert crossings on Sly and Blanche, to construct 2 separate pedestrian crossings at those 2 locations, to expand the parking areas on the south side of the creek, so kind of in the areas of these soccer fields, to have a lot of additional parking there, and also to install a new playground on the south side that would be fully ADA compliant. The idea with that is that anyone then that needs ADA equipment would be able to park and then be able to use the playground. And then if you are not ADA compliant, you'd be able to park in some of the new parking areas, use the pedestrian crossings to go to the north side of the creek, and use the other playgrounds that are there, some of the shelters. What that would mean also is for Woodall Field, that you would need to park on the south side and then walk across the creek and get to Woodall Field, which is a distance of about, depending on where you would park, 400 to 800 feet or so. What is good about that is it would add some additional parking around the soccer facilities, which that area actually gets used more often even than Woodall Field, and it's also it's the most reasonable option that is available. Then the fourth option is to remove the culvert crossings at Sly and Blanche. Again, that seems to be a consistent theme. And then construct a low water crossing that complies with FEMA standards. So that's likely going to be at Sly Street. And again, that means during high water events, that crossing would be unusable because it's not a bridge. It would be a low water crossing. And then to construct a new road from the intersection of Woodland and Junction to the park. Looking at that entire project, we would anticipate it being somewhere around $1.1 million to complete that. That number might even be a little low. That was kind of just a beginning estimate of it. These are just to give you ballpark ideas of each of these projects. When we actually do it, there's probably going to be some fluctuations, and I hope the council is aware of that. That was just our best first chance estimate at getting that done. So to build the new road that would extend all the way from Junction to the field, that would be $1.1 million, and likely probably $1.2 million or so. What that option would provide is 2 crossings most of the time. So there would be a low water crossing at Sly Street. That, again, 90% of the time would be open. That likely would not be usable for buses, but for most personal vehicles that would be able to be used. Buses would need to come off of Junction, and so likely at Junction and Woodland, we would want to convert that into a 4-way stop so that people coming down Sly would actually stop there and not drive as fast as what often occurs. It also would allow, even during high water events, there would be a safe means of getting out of the park. It also would provide some additional access to the western side of the park, where the city has a lot of land, but there's not a lot of usage there because that area is quite a distance from the parking area, or from all the parking areas that have already been developed. So what we are asking of the council is to provide us some direction as to which of the 4 options you would like to proceed with. We do need to write a letter to FEMA by the end of the year to be able to tell them that we are going to be proceeding with options either 1 through 4. By proceeding, that also means we need to move fairly quickly with it. It doesn't mean construction will start this March because things would have to be engineered, but we have to start making progress. Once the council makes a choice, we will write a letter, and then I'm sure we will be having at least monthly phone calls with FEMA where they will be asking what's our progress on engineering designs, when are we bidding, when is construction going to start, that sort of thing. So it's not something that we can just make a choice and then hope that, in 5 or 10 years we actually start construction. FEMA is going to require us to get working on this project. And so, and Unfortunately, this is, nothing that anyone's really excited about. None of these projects are on your capital improvement lists of everything that we'd like to see happen, but this is something that's required in order for us to be compliant as a community with FEMA's floodplain insurance program, which is really a necessity.
Any questions for Daniel?
Are there any other stakeholders in this besides the city?
It depends on what you mean by stakeholders. As far as individuals that are responsible to ensure that we become compliant, the city is responsible for that. So as far as either completing the CLOMAR and hoping that it turns out well, or removing the two structures that are there, that is on the city's responsibility to get that done. If you do look at facilities, though, that are on the north side of the creek, the city owns all the land there, but there is a large field there, Woodle Field, that has millions of dollars worth of improvements on it that's owned by the school district. That is leased by the school district from the city.
Mr. Mayor.
And the lease does expire at the end of next year, 2023.
Go ahead, Becca.
I have a couple of questions, please. So when we talk about when these crossings were converted from the low water crossing, that several decades ago, we're talking like the 90s, maybe late 80s.
Late 80s, 90s.
I know growing up, they were always low water. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I remember. Also, growing up, they were always low water. So, do we know, going back to when these when these crossings were built, is it under the NFIP that FEMA's claiming they have authority, saying that, hey, you didn't get the proper permits back then, according to the NFIP? Is that what are they saying during that time that the permits were
according to
needed and authorized?
The city did not go through the procedures under 44 CFR 59.
Okay, so the congressional funding,
yeah,
regulations. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
No, that's okay. I was just curious what they were claiming. We didn't, the council in the city back then didn't follow. So essentially, Daniel, what you're saying is FEMA's forcing our hand on this issue, despite 3 years ago reimbursing us for these projects. I mean, that just, it shouldn't surprise me, but I don't know.
Two sides.
It just is very frustrating. I'm sorry. So
Yes.
What they're saying in forcing our hand on this issue, we either follow the requirements that they're forcing us to do, or they're going to remove our eligibility from the NFIP program, right?
Correct.
Okay, how many do we know how many houses participate in that program approximately?
We do not know the number. Discussions that we had with FEMA back a year and a half, 2 years ago, they were saying anywhere from 20 to a third of the community was in floodplains. Now with that, but most likely people only buy flood insurance if they still have mortgages. Yeah. And so I can't tell you if 20 to 30, 5% of people have mortgages, but likely it's hundreds and hundreds of properties up to probably 1,000.
Okay, so it's not an insignificant number
not at all.
of homes here in town that utilize that program. I mean, it's so frustrating to me that they're doing this after having essentially approved our rebuilding of those crossings and the reimbursement. I mean, for me, Mr. Mayor, it comes down to the NFIP program being so, important for our residents to be able to access and participate in. And I guess I could support option number 4. I think that the road going from Sly and Woodle over to Junction is an intriguing idea. It is something that the city has had before. There was a road back in the day going through there. I think that it could be a public safety enhancement for us to have, you know, a access on that side in that area. So I think that I could support the option 4 that Daniel and the city staff presented. And low water crossings aren't new to the city in those areas. We had them for decades and decades when we were younger growing up here.
But that was just for one low water crossing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mayor, but just to let everyone know, your direction tonight is not necessarily determining all of these fine details as far as exactly how many pedestrian crossings, the exact locations of all that. All of that would need to be engineered and designed later. This is just giving us direction to be able to explain to FEMA, this is how we anticipate mitigating it. We are going to start the design work. There'll be more discussions later. These are just kind of the basic parameters, and then some of those things can change as you process this more.
Yeah, and in infrastructure committee, option 4 was the one that the 4 of us and city staff agreed would be the best with the 2 accesses in and out. So I'm with Beck on that. I think I would support number 4.
I guess for me, I'm a little bit confused why 4 is the option of choice. To me, so it's double the cost, right? And I guess what's the more appealing about option 4? It's almost like you're taking away part of the park by putting in the road on that west side of the park. And to me, that's the most peaceful area of the park. So to now add a road in the middle of the city park in the most peaceful area, I mean, is that what we're going for in our city park? Do we want the entire city park to be a road? Shouldn't it be a place where you're getting away from the traffic?
Well, in some situations, that will be your only access into the park. If this water crossing and this Sly and Blanche are both underwater, that property is pretty much untouchable. So that access off a junction would give you that access if either one of these were underwater.
That's
Well,
the
you'd
only,
be
that's
adding-
the only guaranteed land road into the park.
But you'd be right. And so to me, though, I guess I use this park a lot. I'm on that side of town, and so I know all the areas inside out. I guess if you're adding parking by the soccer fields where it's the busiest, and then, so to me, option 3, you're gaining a lot. You're gaining parking where there's awful parking, you know, for the busy times during soccer games. You're adding an ADA compliant playground even, and then it's almost like you're adding more of a peaceful park feel by entering into the park through a pedestrian walk. Almost like you're entering into another area instead of just building roads and it not even really seeming like a peaceful park anymore. I mean, it's not that far from where those pedestrian crosses would be. It's not far to get to the football field from there. So, I don't know. And then, gosh, and there are those houses at the end of the park there. I don't know. To me, option 3 just seems like you're gaining a lot more by doing option 3, and it's less invasive, if that's the word, I guess.
The only problem with option 3 is safety. If we have a fire there, which we have had 2 in the last couple of years, I can't get fire trucks there. I can't get an ambulance there if somebody gets injured at a football game or at the park, or you have no vehicular access with option number 3.
So, well, there's no road right now through that area on the west side. What if, so where those 2 houses are over there, where there's then a shop, I mean, can part of that area be paved too as a parking lot? And then there's parking then on that side? Because
we
that's
can
a
do
big
whatever,
dirt
absolutely.
area over there. I mean, couldn't there be parking right there then for people access? And then, I mean, any emergency vehicles would have that same, I mean, I don't think it's that.
At some point in time, though, like Seth, I gotta get an ambulance down to the football field. I mean, we've
Okay,
got to
the
have a
football
way to
field.
get there.
Okay, gotcha, all the way down.
Well, and there's city staff doing general maintenance.
Right.
You know, blowing out sprinkler systems, cleaning the restrooms,
Pickups,
cleaning the
yeah.
shelters. Yeah, the pump track, yeah, I forgot about that's over there too. Access, and then we have a snowstorm and there's a football game in October. People have to hike across the snowstorm to get to the football. I guess I'm like,
I get it for
Yeah,
access,
I
but
know what
I
you're
just
saying.
feel like it's really going to take away from the park. And the park is just gonna be a green space, a long, narrow green space, with just traffic always going by. So, I don't know, I just think a road running that way, I mean, maybe we can figure out a way to run it in a way that it's
I think that
not taking over.
option 4 is the only option that I see that provides ADA compliance as well.
Yep, to the park.
in the shelters and.
And Councilor Wilkerson, I do want to note that road, that's what occurs when you have me try to do a map. I'm not going to say that that's actually what would be designed exactly, that straight of a line. That was my graphical expertise. I don't think that would be the final design.
If you take a close look, you'll find the remnants of the old existing road, which dips substantially. It comes down to the lower portion of Woodland Drive and comes way down below the tree line. Comes down below. You can almost see it in there right now in the option 4 picture. The old road is the light marking area that connects almost directly to the road that's there, the current road that's there. Yep.
We've tried to look at it and see how this possible road would make enhancements and improvements to that piece of the park. It is very underutilized.
So would it be then on the south side of the bike path? Because then the whole bike path, I'm imagining, would have to be redone.
I think parts of the bike path, I mean, ideally, you would not want the bike path to cross the road. I think we would look at the road, in my mind, we would try and keep it as far south as we can along the bank. I think the other consideration that will come into play is our new sewer interceptor line. We would want that to go down the middle of the road. So I think there's some moving parts and pieces yet. Like Daniel said, we'll kind of flush all those out as we move forward. We just got to kind of land on what the general consensus is to move forward to figure all these parts and pieces out.
What do you have, Bonnie?
Are you thinking that when you're talking about constructing that road, will that road link up so that you can drive all the way to the football field parking?
Yes.
Correct, yep.
Okay, and then my question, Daniel, too, is do you have any funding rabbits in your hat that you haven't dared talk about yet? I mean, are there possibilities?
Faye has a safe in our office is what I'm thinking right now.
We're going to have to break into that.
I forgot the code, but I think I'll look at it again.
But I have an observation I'd like to share while we're on that issue. Since the school district's lease for Whittle Field expires next year, I think a substantial lease adjustment would be appropriate if that road is designed primarily for the service of that leased field. And they should be aware, not necessarily that that's going to happen, but at least that that's a consideration that, you know, except for school lunches, there are no free lunches.
So one of the things that's come about to me through talking with my guys who've been here for quite a while, those low water crossings were taken out and the culverts put in primarily for the fact that buses were getting hung up going across them. That the buses continue to get longer and longer, and now when the football teams arrive in motor coaches, charter buses, they couldn't get across the low water crossings and were getting hung up. And so that's what, in essence, prompted the culverts to be put in and the roads to be leveled out. Primarily that, and then safety, and probably all of you guys remember we used to have this. I don't even want to call it a pedestrian bridge. I don't know what it was. It was kind of you hung onto a rope and went across, because that was the other problem was the kids were coming to use the track, and when the water was running across there, the school was worried about them going through the water. So we had these makeshift pedestrian crossings.
We gave them a rope.
Yeah.
Part of the experience.
They weren't quite that bad, but they were, I know you probably remember them. Yeah, they were about this wide.
Made for bar joists.
They were, yes. Yep.
Well,
Chief, do you see any problem at the intersection? Jody, do you see any problem at the intersection, putting a four-way stop there at Junction and Whittle?
Terrible intersection.
It'd probably take a little bit of enforcement with that corner right there.
Rick, is there some signage we could put on the
We'd,
top of
we'd have
Sly
to do
coming?
some signage, and we'd have to clean some of them trees out of the right of way for line of sight.
But
Like
not
conceptually, I think it'll work. We'd still have to work through all the bits and pieces to make it work. It would probably make that road a lot safer. We've had quite a few people coming down that, it's signed 25. I think people drive about 55 or 60.
Yes.
So there's some things that we can do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Speed bump, yeah.
We've got plenty of bumps now.
right.
Well, I mean, it makes me sad then that FEMA is forcing our hand like this, and I really think that, wow, this is going to take away from the park, but.
Yeah, it's gonna make the park more accessible.
But less of it.
Well, what I'm saying is there's gonna be a lot more traffic in that park because of it.
Well, any further discussion? Amanda's got something to add. You're bringing your wallet?
So what you're saying on the FEMA side is that there's no additional funds to help fix any of this? Okay.
Correct.
So from a personal standpoint, I spend a lot of time down there, especially at the football field. And just so you're aware, like, in addition to the scoopers playing there, we have youth football that plays there sometimes 6 weekends in the fall, bringing teams from all over the Black Hills and their families. Recently this year, we hosted a playoff weekend where there were 6 games down there. Soccer, is a busy thing down in that area. People are going from the soccer fields to the football fields and back and forth. So when you're making the decision, just consider our youth and all the families and people that are coming to use these facilities. And we're trying to promote quality of life in our community and recreation and things like that. So easy access is always good. And also to that, our elderly and disabled population, even from parking in the front row, to get people around that track up to the stands. I have in-laws that are of that, and that's a long walk around that field for people who have a disability or they're elderly. So the further we push them out to get to watch their grandkids or their family members, take that into consideration as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Well, if money was no object.
Build a bridge.
A bridge at Blanche Street, the extended road that goes up to Junction, and the expanded parking would all be great additions to our park, wouldn't they?
Ultra fantastic.
I thought we had that safe.
So we have recommendation from staff for the option number 4. We had some avid discussion on it. Is there a motion?
A motion to go ahead with option number 4.
First by Preston to move forward with option 4 in communications with FEMA.
One more question.
Go ahead.
Option 4, we have the slash mark for a new low water crossing. On top of the slash mark at Blanche Street, we have a road termination. So the road terminates, but is there going to be a low water crossing for pedestrians?
No, there's going to be a bridge.
There's a pedestrian.
Yeah,
To connect the rec path, so you.
What I tried to show on that is that we would need to remove the existing culvert crossing there, so that's the red mark, and then the proposal is to add a new low water crossing with the purple mark that's there, and then also somewhere in that area, I imagine a pedestrian crossing that would be blue as well.
And an infrastructure, we talked about it, so it can handle lawnmowers.
Yeah.
Whatever we used at the time for skid steer or whatever, for rec path, snow removal too.
There is no good solution. Me being a grandparent with boys and girls, we go from a soccer field to a football field, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, depending on the play day. So we can't win here. I think this option 4 gives us probably the best option that we can get. It's a long way around for four-wheel traffic, but at least you can get there.
So we have a first on the floor with recommendation of option 4. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Tony. Any last discussions, public or council? None being heard. All those in favor of the motion to have number 4 be the option in communications with FEMA as we move forward before the end of the year, please indicate by stating yes.
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 Opposed to no. That motion carries with option 4 as the recommendation.
Hopefully there will be more than one payee involved in this. This is going to be expensive.
Item 11.7 is also discussions, and this is chapter 15.07. It's the right-of-way maintenance. Eric's been working on this for us, so we'll turn it over to him for a staff report there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A common practice among many communities throughout the nation is generally the landowners abutting a right-of-way manage or maintain the right-of-way from their property line to the road surface. And the city of Sturgis also generally practices that same process. However, over the years, there's been some inconsistencies that have grown. Either the right-of-way is not being maintained or the city has taken over the maintenance of those. The goal of this ordinance is to essentially clarify and rectify any of the inconsistencies and essentially put the burden back on the landowners to maintain that area between the property line and the road surface. And a lot of examples of these inconsistencies have been attached to the report. There's numerous instances of long stretches, especially of kind of the non-developed areas where the city took over maintenance of these right-of-ways. And along a large stretch going out to the school, along the bike paths and things of that sort. This ordinance would aim to essentially shift that to the abutting landowners to maintain those areas and provide specific standards for this maintenance. For instance, within 10 feet of either side of the bike path, and make sure trees aren't overhanging, make sure weeds and grass aren't too high. And the ultimate purpose of those type of standards is to ensure that, one, there's no obstructions or any visibility issues, which is primarily for safety reasons, but also for, say, like going out to the bike path going out to the school is commonly used amongst kids. There's always potential of animals and snakes and things of that sort crossing if the high grass is right on the edges. So it's essentially trying to create a buffer zone similar to sidewalks. And
Do you see a problem with any of that, Eric?
for the, like the bike path?
Yeah, what's the kickback to the property owners?
I mean, essentially, it's for the benefit to the property owners is what you're looking for. I mean, essentially, it's just enacting a duty that's commonly used and trying to, because there's a lot of, the city has a lot of issues trying to keep up with this maintenance because essentially they're allocating limited resources to, say, do mowing rather than doing other public works duties. And the goal is to place the burden back and the duty back on the abutting landowner. For instance, if you have, say you live in town and you have a sidewalk and then a little grassy area and then the street surface, the general assumption is the landowner has the responsibility of mowing that little grassy area. And that's expanding to, say, like the ditches and things of that sort as development expands.
There will be blowback, but I agree with your analysis.
I think it's important to state that this is an extra step in the ordinance process along with first and second reading. This is something we've enacted for a couple years now where there's been discussion on the front side. That's where we're at in this stage. I think it's important to note that it's my perception that the vast majority of areas that we currently maintain that are truly the adjacent property owners own us to do so. The city does it because it's not going to get done if we don't do it, which when it involves sight lines and safety, like you said, with varmints and snakes and everything else that comes out there. I think over the years we've taken over those duties because just the absolute need to make sure it looks good and is safe. My point is I think there's areas throughout the town, part of it been developed 50 years ago, where there's a good chance that it's impossible for that landowner to maintain that property, whether it's a incline that's too great for someone that owns the property next to it. It's something that we're going to have the uphill climb to battle when we go to a property and say, well, now you have to start taking care of it. And they say, well, I've had this house for 46 years and I've never had to take care of it. We're going to have that battle ahead of us. I think the intent is clear and fair, but I think the reality is pretty tricky when it comes down to it. So I just want to put that on the table as a discussion point, that it could create quite a firestorm.
And there are mechanisms within the ordinance. Ultimately, this codifies and kind of expressly provides for the standard practice, but also there is provisions that allow for expanded compliance where there are, or alternative compliance, because there are properties where it's a steep incline, it's almost impossible to maintain. So it provides room for exceptions to those specific properties as they come up, but essentially developing citywide standards and processes when those alternate compliance would come into play, specific regulations. So it's not specifically for a landowner, but you can develop the regulations where if there's a steep hill of this incline that the alternate compliance rules would come into play and then limit it to what is feasible. Because one aspect of this ordinance provides for enforcement of maintenance, the right-of-way maintenance. So what's happened in the past is the city's essentially stepped in for a landowner that's failing to maintain their right-of-way. This provides more teeth for the city to essentially enforce that on the landowner themselves.
Yes, Bonnie. Do you have some right away? Do you know your properties?
Oh, yeah. There are a couple of things. In that, if the ordinance works as an education piece, as an awareness raiser, then it takes care of itself. Enforcement isn't an issue. And I think there are some areas in town in which that's in question and nobody really knows whose baby it is. The other piece of it is how we go about processing it, how we go about implementing it. And I would rather hope that we did it with lips and not teeth, because that just really isn't where we should be starting. At the same time, I look at these areas, and I guess I'm not really sure about the communication here with the pictures. Is the city saying, here are the yellow lines where we're doing it now, we want to quit?
Yes.
Okay, so if we've established a practice, you don't just stop, let it overgrow, and then bust the guy that doesn't pick it up. You pass that on. You do that intentionally and collaboratively. The other thing is, I look at these areas, I think this is
It died on you. Oh, there it turned on. I heard it when it clicked.
Yeah, give it time to get there. I'm okay if I keep moving. I just can't sit down and start over again. So I should just pace the room, I guess. The other thing is, you can't look at these, like these large stretches of that someone owns the property, and be enforcing there, and not be willing to take on the railroad. Because all along that railroad track is stuff that should be taken care of and isn't. And particularly down there by Burger King, that place is 4 feet high with thistles. Thistles are noxious, they're
And it
invasive,
stinks.
and the state requires us to remove them. I go out on that acre in Boulder Canyon and dig those things out and spray them, and it's a constant battle, but the railroad doesn't have to do anything about it. Now, one year before I started coming to meetings, I fussed my full head off until the city did go out and spray them because the railroad wouldn't. But again, you know, you've got to be equitable. If we're going to ask these people to pick it up, we've got to ask everybody to pick it up.
Which includes the school and this county, and I mean,
Exactly.
there's a lot of people involved here. A lot
Exactly.
of organizations even.
Yeah. And so, to me, there's nothing wrong with the expectation. I mean, this is normal. But how we execute it will make the difference. And we've come a long way. We don't need to lose that rapport. I'm going to stay here because I'm going to say something at the end.
Say, Eric, the mowing end, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, that's pretty lineal, follows our major arteries. There's some pieces of the ordinance as written that I guess I question what your intent and the direction is. And the first of those is 1571A6, and that's a debris basin.
What is that? What is a debris basin?
Flood and snow.
The yeah, the debris basin is. Hold on.
I don't think it's in there, Daniel.
No, it's not. Just give me a second. Do you have a second question, Counselor?
Yes.
We'll get to that one in a minute.
Okay, that's good. 1571B3. So we're asking private landowners to remove dead deer from the right-of-way? I mean, that's my read of it.
I mean, this is generally fairly flexible. I mean, overall, the city manages the deer, anything of that sort. I mean, this would come into play if, say, they butchered a deer and just threw the carcass in the right of way. And I think I added a a specific component of it that any sort of animals hit by vehicles or die now, kind of natural causes would not apply to that section. Yeah, vehicle strikes or natural reasons. And the goal of that is to try to not require the landowners to maintain any sort of animals, deer, things of that sort that end up in there.
Unless they place them there themselves.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if they intentionally put them there, then, I mean, there's a variety of different aspects. We could, illegal dumping, things of that sort, but.
So you got the debris basin pulled up, it looks like.
Yes, in regards to your first question, this is the debris basin. So ensuring that people maintain that. So in other words, that they're not building gardens out or landscaping patios and other things that people often do, because when you look, some of these properties have tremendous backyards. Yeah, and so it's a huge backyard, and people oftentimes will look at that and say, you know, they can make all these improvements out there. Well, you can't actually do that.
That's one of the things that's
Yeah.
by the Corps, and we continually get written up or have a finding that things are happening here or that there's weeds growing and things like that, but it's not our property to be able to manage.
So it's just a way that we're able to, through city ordinance versus the Army Corps, which we don't have the ability to enforce that, but via city ordinance to say you can't build things in this debris basin.
So everything to the north of the debris basin is actually, you know, which would turn into the Dead Man Channel. We do have the ability and we have the right of way. The debris basin is actually common property lines, and we don't have any property in there. It's private property, but it's also delineated as the debris basin.
I can't tell where this is.
That's Dead Man Creek between Elk and Raccoon.
Right
Towards
here.
the state
The
shop.
big church is at the bottom center.
The Marcotte property is right here.
So
Are there areas in town that you have labeled as debris basins? Or?
No, that's the only debris.
This is the
actual
one.
Debris basin is that one.
So that's a designated debris basin.
Correct.
And so that means 10 feet either side of the channel?
No, it's big. It's actually platted out. It shows on the plat, and it's I want to say, no, I don't, like 100 feet wide. It's an actual.
It's a huge portion of it.
And the city's has the financial responsibility to clean that up, or the property owner?
We're the sponsor of that. Just like we are the Dead Man Channel, we don't own it. The Corps of Engineers owns all of this. But when we had them build it and we took over financial responsibility to maintain it, we're what they call the sponsor.
So we're required to ensure that the Army Corps' regulations are enforced even if we don't own the property. So here's an example that we don't own the property. The property owner should be aware of these regulations because it's on the plat. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've read it, but at the time of closing, you should be aware of it at that point. And so that is a requirement that you maintain that. Unfortunately, every year it becomes an issue that, you know, there's someone that puts and usually it's a large garden out there. Sometimes it's a big patio or a fire pit or whatever else, which is a nice, you know, backyard feature, but that's a violation that we become responsible for. And so it's good to have something in a city ordinance that we can say, no, this is actually a violation of city ordinance. We need you to remove it. And if not, then we could cite you. We don't want to cite you, but you need to remove it. Right now, we don't really have much other than to say it's on your plat. You should obey the plat, but
But that takes me back to viewing things like an ordinance as an education piece. You don't wait till somebody's in violation. You educate before they get there. Because who remembers all that stuff you read when you bought the piece?
And we do that. The issue is that when someone says, well, we're not going to, then we're kind of stuck in limbo.
Well, and I look at that and I say, okay, what kind of, because I don't have a vision of it, I don't know what that looks like, but what kind of equipment does it take to keep that up? does the standard lawnmower do it, or does that put an equipment
It's
obligation?
for the most part, you can't build anything or you can't park cars in it, you can't put your garden shed in there, you can't bring in, 20 cubic yards of topsoil. to
fill,
make a
yeah.
garden.
But do you have to
leave
mow it?
Natural, no.
No.
You do not have to mow it.
You
That's-
just can't start adding
It's for the
things
most
to
part,
it.
it's the creek, it's rock.
That specific item, though, doesn't really say anything about structures and other items. It's specific to grass and shrubs and tree limbs and.
We can add some clarifying language in that. Eric can work on that.
I think that's important, the clarifying language. I'm assuming that the black lines are delineated lines and not property lines.
Well, I think they're property lines.
Those are property lines?
Approximate. This is not survey data, but it's approximate property lines.
Holy cow, some of those people got 2 acres there.
Yeah.
But it says right here that we're requiring it to be trimmed to 8 inches, so you're
Well,
saying
that-
they have to mow it.
That's what we're talking about, that when we actually would have a first reading, we would have some clarifying language on that, that it's to ensure that there's not improvements made to it, that fill dirt's not brought in.
Okay.
And as it sits right now, the current language has it to where it's actually, they have to maintain on either side of the basin and not the actual basin itself. So I can add language in there to,
Yeah.
because I think when I was drafting this, I wasn't entirely sure on what the drainage basin was, to be just honest. So
my
now
club.
that I'm a little more familiar with the drainage basin, I can tweak language to better fit
Yeah.
that.
Do we know if anyone has anything in that area now, like a garden or a shed or anything?
We've got it all, for the most part, pretty well cleaned out, but it's been over the years, I mean, it's a constant, and again, like she said, it's more educational and it gives us something to fall back on. It's not like we're going out there, or Dave's going out there writing tickets every day. Same with the right of way. It just becomes, if we're gonna continue to mow those areas, each and every year, we get requested to mow more and more. It's like, well, you're doing his across the road, why aren't you mowing mine? Well, if that's the direction you wanna give us, we can do that, but that's less
We
time
need
that
more
we'll
people.
spend in the parks.
Well, now, like that area that I asked about once before, that kind of snakes through there. I think it comes toward Pine View, but you look off of Pine View and it goes back in between the Knocker Canyon Campground and those houses.
Right.
Is that a debris basin?
No, that's the drainage detention pond
Oh.
area.
Yeah, so detention ponds, the city does maintain those. We hire a contractor to do that, so it's not city crews that do it. This year, unfortunately, the contractor was short of labor and ended up mowing each basin, I don't know, 2 or 3 times throughout the summer, which was not what we had wanted, but ultimately that's the service they were able to provide.
I think the other thing too is to be able to go back and identify these areas, because we get calls, Daniel does and I do. I mean, some people want us out there spraying, putting fertilizer in them and spraying for dandelions and a drainage detention pond is different from a yard. It doesn't get the same level of care necessarily as what a drainage would, or a detention pond versus what a boulevard would. And so to be able to delineate which each of these areas are and what level of care they're gonna get, I think is probably important.
So is John Q. average citizen trying to abide by the ordinances? Is there a glossary in our documents anywhere? Is there some place that these things are defined? Or am I at the mercy of a Google search that I get the same definition that you're?
They're defined in the front on the first page. Each is defined.
There's a definition for each title.
For things like debris basin and,
Yeah.
okay.
There was one additional item, Eric, and that was stagnant water, 1571C. And I don't quite understand why the private landowner would regrade or fill the right-of-way. And, I mean, do we want private landowners grading or filling our right-of-ways?
I mean, the ultimate purpose of the stagnant water provision is just to, if somebody's going to, say, shift the drainage from their own property but I mean, that can easily be changed or even fully removed.
I think one of the issues, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily in these homes, I just zoomed in to kind of illustrate a point. I haven't viewed these homes to see if this is a situation, but we have a lot of areas where there's a road that goes through and there's not curb, gutter, sidewalk. There's just a ditch on the side. People often will end up filling in the ditch so that it's easier for cars to park along the side of the road, or they'll add a culvert, for a driveway, and the culvert may not be sized quite correctly, or it may not be installed at an appropriate elevation so that drainage continues on. And so we want to ensure that when people maintain the ditches, that they actually maintain the ditches, that they're not altering the flow so that water ends up stagnating and backing up. And you see that in a lot of areas. And again, I want to say, I don't know about those homes. I just wanted to illustrate an area, but during wet years, you can definitely see that there are areas where people's driveways have changed what was designed to have a flow of the stormwater, and it causes stagnant water to become stagnant.
Do driveways require a permit? Is that a permitted, putting in a driveway, is that a permitted action?
They are. I mean, any new driveway would be permitted, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of old ones that get put on that weekend.
Would that be one for better clarification? I mean, I agree with maintaining those roadway ditches, right? Wherever we don't have curb and gutter, we have to maintain those drainages. And by maintaining them, I mean not filling them up and eliminating them.
Yeah. No, definitely. We can work on the language to try to make that clear. I think Eric's doing that as we speak.
Done. That would be the end of my comments. Thank you.
Any other discussion on Title 15 here for discussion?
Just a comment.
Yep.
Good job, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, this is a discussion to gather our thoughts and make it as clear as possible as we bring it forward to first reading, to have council's intent with the input of the public and staff on what we're trying to achieve. And I think this one's a tough one, but I think it's sensible to work our way through it. So if there's no further discussion on right-of-way maintenance, there is no action needed on that item, but expect in the near future some first reading coming forward here. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Item 12 is other matters before the council. Brief moment in time of non-agenda items to be brought up before the city council. Bonnie's here. We'll turn it over to the public first.
Tonight's discussion and agenda have brought several things to mind for me that I'd like to ask about. We saw those culverts over the channel. How often do you review or inspect the other channel crossings like that? I mean, how many of them are there in town?
This review included all of the crossings throughout town, and so that's done, is that biannually? Every 2 years?
2 years if they're
Depending on their condition.
their classification, and then the other ones on the channel get done every year.
Yeah.
With the MS4 and the
But-
Army Corps, right?
Okay, but we only saw 2 of them in this report tonight?
Right.
The other ones over the Dead Man Channel, is that what you mean? That one's done by the Army Corps, and that's done every year. That's when they do it. Oftentimes we get the report in August. It'll take them quite a while to review their on-site data, but when we get that, we present it to the council, and it depends. That's not.
Well, you know, I live on one, so
Yeah.
but I don't remember ever hearing about that. And so then that brings up some other questions about the channel. Like, we've got a spot on the channel where somebody plowing the snow bashed the guard fence, and so there's a pole there I tried to fix it, but I couldn't get it too much stronger than what it was. And so how do those kinds of things get taken care of? Because if I laid against it, I would fall in.
So you're talking, yeah, she's talking the smaller channel, the one that's built.
So yeah, the one that the Corps of Engineer inspects is the Dead Man Channel. She's talking about this little one that starts off of Ballpark, and I'm not even sure where it actually ends. It goes underground eventually over by
Starts at gaps over
by
there.
the school.
Yeah.
We have gone in there before because that's all on private property. The city doesn't maintain an easement, nothing for it. We've went in there since I've been at Public Works 3 times and completely cleaned and made contact with all the owners and said, hey, this is your responsibility. We've cut all the trees, we've fixed the fences, we've cleaned it out, and it never, it needs it again, but.
Well, and I'm asking legitimately because I do see that as my responsibility, but
Right.
my problem is when I cut those trees, I
Don't
try
throw
to.
them in the channel.
Well, no, I don't throw them, but they go there on their own,
Right.
They're not very disciplined. I mean, I try to tie onto them and hold them back, but once I drop them in there, then I'm in trouble if I put my ladder in and go down and get them
No.
because I'm not supposed to be in the channel.
That's a different channel. That actually is private property. That's your property, your guys'
So I
property.
can put my ladder in there
Yeah.
and go down and get them?
Yep.
Okay.
Don't do that, Bonnie. Do not do that.
If not me, then who?
I
It's just
understand.
not gonna happen otherwise. Okay, so then,
We wouldn't find you for a month.
And I don't know if that even has a name.
would you not look forward to that? So that tells me on the channel that I do need to be working harder at cleaning that out. And that's, like, since you put that in there, that's sinking down so the wall on the outside of the channel is taller now than, because the dirt used to be up against it. It's like my lilac bushes are falling off my yard down into the bank of the channel. So I just deal with that. I deal with that.
Until the council directs me to. It's part of the Dolan Creek drainage. Again, it's private property. We can come in and do whatever. It's the direction of the council and the funding for it. It's,
So what about alleys? What about alleyways and the jungle that grows in the alleys?
we're trimming alleys right now. And again, we every year we make a concerted effort to get the landowners to do it. We deal with it every year. You get phone calls from people and we come in and trim the alleys.
But you want us to do it if we can.
That's what this ordinance, it gives us a little bit of teeth to enforce that.
You know
that
why I'm
was
asking these questions out loud?
that was in the last, or not. I'm sorry.
2 sips ago.
2 sips ago to remind people to do that, and I actually got a lot of comments back from residents about how needed that was. So every year we advertise that in the SIP. We'll put in Facebook posts, everything else to do that. But like Rick said, when eventually time comes, we'll go through and we actually trim it to maintain it as well. But if people don't like how we trim it, then the answer is to trim it ahead of time.
And we are on our, right now, we're doing alleys. When we have free days, that's what we're doing, is trimming alley trees.
Okay. And then, now I'm gonna leave that and say one more thing, that when we put the documents up and you put the staff explanation up, we're still doing things like, I guess we can reasonably assume people know what FEMA is, but when the NFIP pops in there, that's an unfamiliar term, and I really wish that we would, the first time you use it, give us a bracket translation so that we understand the document when we read it. It's not a reasonable, if you want the public to participate and care and be concerned and pull on the right end of the rope, you've got to speak to us in a way we understand, and when those things come up like that, it's really off-putting. It's like, I mean, I immediately look it up, but that's not what the majority of your public listener is going to do. So I would just encourage you to do that.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Any other matters from the public before the council tonight? Will council have anything to add? I've got something to add briefly. I don't want to tee off a very large discussion, but I think it's pertinent to have a small discussion with no action at this time. About 11 months ago, we worked forward with a resolution that
had discussions of a city manager subcommittee and possible changes and tweaks to either Title VII or any kind of policies and procedures that go with that. We've met as a committee. We've met within other committees and talked about it. We've come to a lot of good discussions. I think it's pertinent and important that we uphold our resolution that was passed that stated that we will have a meeting on and take input from others and from the public on that discussion. I think the time is running out pretty quickly, so I wanted to at least bring it forward as a discussion point. I've had a lot of discussions with city attorney. I've had a lot of discussion with council members, and I think there's some solutions out there that we already abide by, utilize, and follow. It's just we should put it on in one area so it's clear to people how our operation works. I think it's also fair to state that when I first became mayor in 2011, our town is much different than it was to this day than it was in 2011. I chalk a lot of that up to Mr. Ainsley and his guidance and his expertise and professionalism. So I think it's important to understand that this is not anything towards Daniel at all. It's certainly a fact that we have to move forward and bring this stuff out and put it in a logical place that makes sense. So when people do have questions, we can state these policies and procedures are in this section of our ordinances, or this is what was adopted by the council, or this is the direction. I mean, the bottom line is there's a lot of things that go on, how we, just like what Bonnie's talking about, day in and day out activities that council knows because we're in it, but as far as the public's perception, they don't understand where it's coming from or where that direction is, where it was originated and how it's passed through to staff and how the execution is done. So I think it's important that that's brought forward. I certainly welcome any other comments from council, but I do believe that it's up to us to do it correctly, and that does mean that we do have to have a meeting here in the near future, and I think some of that discussion can happen on a regular council meeting, which happens to be in 2 weeks from tonight. So,
If I may,
Please.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, in the last year, I have worked with the Office of City Manager Subcommittee, and that committee has, under the leadership of Councilman Sigmund, has done a lot of work, and I have generated a lot of paper. And one of the impediments to the completion of the project has been the diligence of the committee in looking at those issues and the time it takes to investigate all of the matters of which the council has legitimate concern. I have not, I hope, overstepped my bounds because I can synthesize all of those materials in a report for council and identify the issues that I believe are ripe for council discussion and have that prepared for the meeting on December 19th. I've not done that yet because frankly, I want the cover of council direction before I engage and devote that much time and energy to the preparation of that project. I don't want to do that and say, have council say, what the hell did you do this for? We didn't want that. But I am prepared to synthesize the findings, present them to you, along with items that I think are ripe for discussion. I would be happy to do that if that is the consensus of the council.
appreciate that, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you for bringing this up, Mayor. You know, this group has been working on this for a while. It's been a heavy lift, and as a city attorney, Mark, I believe that you should be tasked with preparing that report and bringing it forward for the December 19th meeting. I hope there's concession amongst the council for that, so that we can continue through and complete this process. Not that we're trying to, you know, affect any piece. It's just a task that we need to do periodically, and it seems like a great time to do it. And it hasn't been an easy task, as you've pointed out. They've been working on this now for a very long time, and it looks like we might be able to bring this to the public and have that discussion and finish the process. So thank you all.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Any other input from council on that matter or any others?
I think it's safe to say that it makes sense to spend the time, Mr. Marshall.
I will do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other matters before council, from council? I do know we have the need for executive session, so we would need a motion to do so.
So moved.
We got a first by Preston for executive session. We have a second by Mike. Mr. Marshall, is there any anticipated action after tonight's discussion in exec?
There is no anticipated action, Mr. Mayor.
With a first and a second on the floor with no anticipated action to follow, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. Currently, it is 9:19. We'll go into executive session at 9:25. Thank you.
Handy. It's part of, but it is a case that you added?
No, it's just the thing that,
That's all I need, just need a flipper.
Are we going yet? We're live?
where's that light?
Where's that Christmas light at?
I never did notice the light.
How'd you not notice
When we first turned it on.
Let it go. Don't double click.
Does the Wi-Fi go off at like 9:30?
We're live. All right, we're back in regular session. The last item is a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
We got a first by Tony and a second by Mike. Was that who that was? We got a first and a second. All in favor to adjourn, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Opposed to no. We're adjourned. 9:58. 10 o'clock already. Time flies when you're having fun.